All right, so we're getting started with writing full stack apps. Always get to kind of go through one together as a class. So today we're just gonna create everything from scratch and see how far we get. And again, as always, anytime any questions pop up, anything we want to discuss, let's just kind of have that good discussion because this is meant to be a solid, good review to prepare you for your personal projects. All right, so to-do list is what we're focused on. I actually downloaded it already, so I could do, let's see, what is it? CD into React. No, app to-do list. All right, and then bring up a coding window and let's get started. There's my VS Code. I want to toss that over here, maybe. Okay, all right, so we have our README. We can read that in our browser because that's easier to read for me. All right, setup, we want to do some setup, create models, front end, yada, yada. I think we should have a good idea of what needs to be accomplished. Again, high level. I usually create the backend first. There's no rule that says you had to create your backend first, but I like knowing what my data looks like and what data I'm going to be sending before I even touch the front end. But again, you're welcome to start with the front end and then use some dummy data and then feed in real data once you do the backend. But we'll start with the backend Django project. All right, so let's get to it. We have a README. That's cool. All right, so I'm going to create a folder. And I'm going to call it backend, just to be super generic. Let's call make dir backend. This is going to house my Django project. So our server and whatever else data we need to serve. So we're going to go into backend folder, and then let's create our Django project. So again, hopefully you guys are pros at this. Hopefully I remember all my steps. If I forget one, I'll probably need to call on you guys. But first thing I want to do is create a virtual environment, as always, with our Django project. Again, the idea of this is to create a bubble for our Django project so that we can kind of fix library versions for this particular Django item. And yeah, let's see. I'm going to, we're going to need authentication, I guess. That's a thing I didn't think about. So let's source. Like this morning source, what is it? .vnv, then activate. All right, so we're in a virtual environment. We install a few items, so we'll do pip install. And since we're going to use, we'll likely use JWT again. That might be the last thing I do if we have time for it. But we're going to fix our Django version to be 3.2.9. Again, the newest release was 4.0 that came out literally like a week ago, or less than a week ago. I think it came out last Tuesday. So we want to fix it to 3.2.9 so that we could use Django REST Framework JWT with this version. All right, so I'm going to install that. Another thing I want to install is Psycho PG because I always use a Postgres database. Let's start with those two items. We might need to add a few more items later. So that's giving us a download here. Should be done shortly.
Ankur, is it in this folder where you usually do your git init also for your backend?
Yeah, so I guess on that note, we do have our parent Git. So I'm going to just create everything on this level. Deploying to Heroku can get kind of tricky, but we're not going to get that far. But I'm just going to have this as one project under one Git project, just to commit it to my GitHub as one project. I could separate it out. We could do that later. So it's pretty easy to split apart that Git in terms of just creating two separate Git projects. But no, I'm just going to create one Git project, which we got from our download.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. All right, so we should be good to go with Django for now. So I'm going to do Django admin, create our project, start project. This is going to be our to-do list. Let's call it to-do server. To server proj. I don't know if my naming is the greatest. Oops, we'll look with that. All right, looks like we can't have dashes, so we'll do underscores. All right, and then I want to create my app, so I'll do Python manage.py start app. I'm going to call this to do server app. All right, that's done. What else I want to do? Probably create a database. So do create DB, call it to do DB. Cool. All right, so I created my app. I created my database. This is usually the time I go into my settings file, make sure I hook all that stuff up. So in my backend folder. Gotta see actually the names of these. All right, in my project, I got my settings file. So two things I need to do: go down to installed apps. I need to add in to do server app. So that's my app name, and then in my database section, I want to switch to Postgres. So PostgreSQL, and I just created my database, and that database was named to-do DB. All right, so again, we're setting up our Django project. All this should be familiar to us, but always good to get a review. All right, so my settings file I think is good. I'm gonna go to my URLs and just get this kind of wired up. Actually, I'm not gonna go to my URLs. I want to start on my models. So let's maybe create a random notes file. Again, this is not something that we normally have to do, but I'm just doing this for us. So let's get gameplan.py. All right, so gameplan.py is going to tell us what we want to do here for our Django project. So creating a server. Let's get our roadmap down. So first, we want to obviously set up a Django project. We don't need to list the steps, but that's what everything we did. Create a virtual environment. That's fine. Virtual environment. Create proj. Create an app, which we did. Create a DB, which we did. Update settings file. Settings.py. All right. So again, after doing all this, we should be good to go. So we can actually fire up our server just to see everything up and running. So do Python manage.py, run server, make sure it actually runs, unless I missed a step. I have unapplied migrations. All right, that's something I need to handle, but my server should be up. So let's actually see that in action. New window. There's my browser. Let's toss that over here. And let's see if our Django server is running. So port 8000, there we go. So you should see this if your project is set up. All right, so looks good. Well, let's continue on. So that was setting up a Django project. So let's call that step 1 or step 0, since we are zero-based as programmers. Then we'll do step 1. Step 1, I like to start with my model. So let's say create our models. After we create our models, what do we want to do? We probably want to update our URLs. Create routes, and then number 3, what would 3 be? Actually, I think for number 2 here, we want to create our serializers. So that's something associated with our models. So create our serializers. Let's go number 3, create our view sets. So we're going to be using DRF Django REST framework. That just makes our lives much easier for as developers. So I need to install Django REST framework. That is something I forgot to do. Step 4, create routes. All right, so I think that should be all of our steps. Maybe I missed one. Anyone think of anything else we need to do? So we'll do models, serializers, view sets, which basically handles our views.py, and then create routes. So I think those are all the wires we need to wire up. If we forget anything, we'll tackle it. All right, create our models.
We don't need to do forms, right? Since we're going to be using the DRF, we don't need any type of form. Okay.
Yep, you got it. Yeah, Django REST framework takes a lot of the hard work or the all that stuff away from us, so that's great. So since we're using Django REST framework, we do need to install it. So to do that, I need to do pip install Django REST framework. I believe that's all one word. One thing I did not do also, I probably want to, anytime you do a pip install, you want to just do a pip freeze and then create your requirements.txt file. Requirements with an S, right? So create my requirements.txt file. So notice this has all the versions of whatever libraries I'm using. So remember we froze or we chose Django to be 3.2.9. We have our Django REST framework, which the latest looks like 3.13, and then CyclePG, yada, yada. All right, so we have that file created. Always good practice to have the requirements.txt. Again, we don't need it for our needs, but if we commit this project and you guys download it, you guys will just use the requirements.txt to do a pip install instead of installing all the libraries yourself. Also, if we deploy like Heroku, that's going to look for requirements.txt. But again, for our needs right now, we don't need it, but it's always good practice to have it. Okay, cool. So that looks good. Let's get that out of the way. All right, so Django REST framework requires a few more items. So if I go back to my settings file, here I need to add a REST framework, I believe is the app name. I think that's the only thing I need to change here. Now we should have access to all the goodies within Django REST framework. So let's kind of get to that. So we wanted to create models next, right? So let's go to our models, which should be in our app folder, and then models.py. Let's get at it. So we're creating to-do lists, and the models that I think we need, and then you guys can kind of help me out here if I forget something. One model would be the task list model. That will inherit from models.model. Again, just to go over what's going on here. This has all the logic for a model that's necessary, like all the bare minimum logic for a model, and we're just inheriting all that stuff and adding onto it for our models. So here, I'll do a pass. Another model I want is something called task. That's also going to inherit from models.model, and we'll add some fields to it. All right, so I think we only need two models right now. We might want to incorporate a user model, but we can use the built-in Django model for that. So let's actually import that from Django.contrib.auth. That's kind of weird. .models import user. All right, just to review, this is the built-in user model. That's something Django already created. I guess we haven't migrated yet, but it will create when we run our initial migrations. That has like typical fields like username, email, password. It does other things with permissions. So again, that's nothing we need to implement unless we want to. Again, we always have the option, say, Django, we want to use your own user model, but usually the default user model is good enough for most of the time, unless you have something super special you need to do. All right, so we import that. A few of you guys might have seen this error before. It looks like I'm encountering it, where I'm getting these yellow squiggles. This is a VS Code thing. Again, it's not going to hinder your development, but it is kind of annoying. I just noticed that now. So to fix it, if you do run into this, if you click down on your, I guess, I don't know, the bottom panel of your VS Code, you should see your Python version listed. So here I have Python. And notice it's pointing to user local, where is it? User local bin Python. That is not in my virtual environment. I want to use this out of my virtual environment so it could, identify the paths correctly. So if you click on that panel, you should get a list of items or locations that you can pick Python from. So there's a 2.7, which is what your OS uses. There's other versions apparently that I have around, but I want to use the one in my virtual environment. So I need to find that. So if I try to navigate to it, I think it's /backend/vnv/ where is it? Bin /python 3.9. Is that where it is? No, I didn't find it. All right, enter interpreter paths. Let's try this way. So I always have trouble with this. I'll be honest. Sometimes it takes a little while, but it is possible to find it. So if I do backend here, it will find it for me. Let's see, backend /.vnv bin Python 3.9. That do it? There we go. So notice I found the path. I had to type it in because when I try selecting it from that menu, it does not find it. It's kind of weird. But notice that now my path says it's in my VNV, right? So now all my yellow squiggles went away. So that's, again, kind of nice to get rid of that item. Michael J.H.
Hi, Ankur. I have a question about the user model that we were just talking about.
Sure.
Over the weekend, I was playing around with the user model, trying to understand it more. And if I understand correctly, if we want to have authentication on our app, but like we also want the user to have a field other than like the default ones, it looks like there's a couple ways to do that. And I can't remember, did we talk about abstract user in our class? Like I can't remember if we talked, anyway, it seemed like the easy way was to make a model and then just make a one-to-one field relationship with user. So like it would be called like, I don't know, app user. And then you just create a one-to-one field with the user model, and then you could just add whatever fields you wanted. So the issue I was running into is like, if I wanted my user to have many of something, like, I don't know, many task lists, I couldn't assign a many to many or a one to many field to the user model. It seemed like the user model only allowed, you know what I mean? Like a one to one. So I don't know. That was just one thing I ran into, and I wasn't sure if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think this is something we covered. I'll be honest, it's something I do super rarely. Like I've done it at least once or twice, but not enough to know the proper way to do it. I remember doing a Google search for this, and there's like, I believe at least 4 different ways you can create your own user model. You could do the one-to-one relationship that you talked about. You can create your own from scratch. You can inherit from like, yeah, some other, I think you said abstract base, abstract user or something. There's a few ways to do it. Based on your use case, one made more sense than the other. To answer the latter part of the question, you can still create a one-to-many relationship. The key thing is you need to create a foreign key in your other model that points to a user. So we'll talk about the relationships we create, because that would be a good review too. But yeah, you can still achieve it. Again, the foreign key would sit in the other model, not in your user model. That's how you
Awesome.
create a
Thank you.
one-to-many. Yep.
Okay, that
So
makes
we'll
sense.
see a one-to-many here. So let's kind of get to that. So task list. I don't know what fields I need. Maybe a name would make sense. So we'll do models dot char field max length. Let's go with 64 characters. What else could we have in our task list? I think I need a buddy here because I didn't really think this through. Let's go with, who am I chatting with? I feel like Scott. Scott, are you there? All right, I'm not sure if Scott's with us. Hopefully Scott returns. Yeah, Ping, are you around?
Yes.
Hey there. Could you help me create my task list model? Do you have any ideas what else I could add in here? So I got name. I can't really think of anything else. Do you have any ideas?
Description.
Yeah, we can give it a description. Makes sense. Models dot char fields max length. Let's give it a good 256. Nothing too long. Obviously, we want to associate a task list with a user. So I think we want a user field. That's something I should have thought of there. So this is going to be our foreign key. It's going to point to user. So again, just to review our model types or model relationships. So again, there's going to be 3 main types of relationships you can have. One to many is probably the most common. So this is where you use a foreign key. Foreign. Spell foreign would be nice. All right, use a foreign key. All right, so this allows us to have a foreign key in one model, and that means any number of task list models I create, we could have multiple items that point to the same record in the user table. That's how you achieve your one-to-many, where the user doesn't really get changed in any way, but it has a foreign key pointing to it, as into its model, that allows it to have, again, I can have 20 different task lists that are pointing to the same user, because we have a user field in our task list model that is referencing our user model. Right. So again, one to many, use a foreign key. If we're doing a one, or I guess a many to many is the next, probably most common. This is where we need to use a join table. Right. This is something I do want to highlight, because if you remember way back to assessment 3, where you're developing a backend database and also a front end HTML site, I will say a lot of students kind of either did not have a join table or had the wrong join table kind of created. This is something, again, definitely you need to understand this. Like, I'm not going to say it's okay if you don't understand the concept at this point. You should understand these relationships. So again, a foreign key for one to many, and a many needs a join table. There's no real way around it.
So wait, Ankur, real quick. You're talking about for the assessment 3, just the actual queries, right? That we didn't need to actually.
No. So there are join queries. So the join keyword is part of SQL, where you're writing queries. And you might write some join statements. That is not what I'm talking about. So thank you for asking that question, because it is it's the same word, but different concepts here. So you actually need a join table to create a many to many relationship. I think we should probably talk about this just to make it clear. So, our typical example is students and courses, right? if you remember from your school interface, we've done this like a few times, so hopefully you guys kind of understand the design here. Students and courses has a many-to-many relationship. The reason being is because one student can be in many different courses. Also, one course can have many different students enrolled in them. There's no way to kind of achieve this with just using foreign keys. So if I try to have like a students model, I'm going to pseudocode this students, and then I had, a course ID as a field. Well, this is going to limit each student to one course ID, right? So my students table would have a primary key, which is an ID. They have a name, yada, yada. We know the details of students model. Same thing with a course. So if I do course ID, course name, and then I had like a student ID as a foreign key. FK. So again, having the field directly in the table limits you to only one single item. We don't store arrays in our inside of a field. I mean, technically speaking, I think SQL does support the ability to store like arrays, like a lot of data, like a list of data into one field, but that's not proper design if you talk to most like database engineers. So again, we're limited to only one entry here for course ID, likewise for student ID. So again, if I had a course called like Donuts 101, only one student could be enrolled in that with this design. You might be thinking, well, what if I just create multiple copies of the same course and have a different student there, right? So if I copy, create like a record for a course that's ID 1, course name would be Donuts 101, and just reference student ID 4, and then why don't I just create another record with the same ID, the same name of the course, but now it has another student with student ID 8 or student ID 9. Well, hopefully you guys know the answer here. So you're creating duplicate data, right? This is the same class you're referring to. You don't want to create multiple records, where you got to type in the course name, because again, one, you can type in the course name wrong. So now this could be like Bagels 101, and then you're like, well, I have the same foreign key, but like I have two different names for them. Like that's not gonna really jive well. Again, many reasons you don't want to duplicate data. We've probably talked about a few of the reasons. Again, writing dry code. Same thing applies for your models. You don't want to repeat data. That's not proper relational database design. So as we kind of see here, foreign keys will not obtain the many-to-many relationship. So since these two models need to have many-to-many, that's where you create a third table, and this is what the join table is. So this would be like course students. We usually call it enrollments because we have like another English term for it, but usually you just combine the names of the two tables, and you don't have to, but I'll call this course students. And now we just have a primary key for this table, and then we'd have two foreign keys. One would point to a student record, and the second would point to the course. You guys kind of following along here, why this is necessary? Because now with this table in place, we can create multiple entries that have the same ID, or we can create multiple entries that have the same course ID. So in this case, let's have records. We'd have course students equals, and this is just pseudocode. We create a record that's like, primary key of this record be 1. We could have course number or student number 6 that's enrolled in course 3. And then we could have a few more entries. So another record. So this has to be unique, but then we could use the same student can be enrolled in course number 77, right? And then we could also have our third record that could be a new student, which is student number 10. They're enrolled in course 3. And then for same student can be enrolled in class number 2. All right. So looking at how we're creating these records, notice we're focused on the second and third entries, right? Because that's our foreign keys. So notice you can have the same student ID with different course IDs, because that means that one student's enrolled in multiple courses. You can also have the same course ID. So notice that we have a 3 here and a 3 here. That's the course ID. So this achieves having one course, but multiple students in them. So again, I would say roughly probably half of the class kind of missed this concept from assessment 3. And probably one of the main concepts what we wanted to emphasize with that assessment or the database part of it. So again, please make sure you understand why you need a join table and how you kind of implement it. Again, the way you implement is simply have multiple foreign keys pointing at whichever tables have the many. So in this case, student and courses have the many-to-many relationships. So essentially what you're doing here is setting up a one-to-many with this and a one-to-many with this, but then you combine that into this table. So those one-to-manys from both sides become a many-to-many relationship via this join table.
Hey, Encore, I just want to add something for clarity, but the way you have it right now, you'd also remove the line
Yes.
21, line 26, right?
Yes. Thank you. Yep. Yeah. So these would just be your models, no foreign keys needed. And then your join table is the one that's actually creating the relationships between your students and courses. These tables are totally separate until the join table kind of unites them in some relational way. Yes. Thank you for asking that or pointing that out. Okay, so again, make sure you understand why you need join tables for many-to-many relationships. So that'll be our tangent on many-to-many. The last relationship that you might run into,
Right.
Again, not very common. Is there a comment out there?
Yeah, I was just, I don't quite understand why we can't use the built-in many-to-many field, which my understanding is it just does exactly what you did, but it just does it under the hood for you.
Yes, Ty, you are correct. So your understanding there is not incorrect. You can use the many-to-many field in Django. So the items I was going over here was specifically for SQL, for databases.
I'm sorry, okay, then I misunderstood.
No, yeah, I don't think I made that clear, but yeah. So you are right. In Django, we can leverage the many-to-many field, which automatically will create a join table behind the scenes. So again, a join table still needs to exist. Django does not circumvent that at all, but it does it again in a friendly manner in terms of developer friendly. So yeah, many-to-many field in Django creates that many relationship and automatically creates a join table for us if we don't want to create ourselves. Yes. All right, the last one, just to kind of round this out, is one-to-one. You won't see this very often, but this, if you do need to implement it, is a foreign key and a unique key. So that'll mean that for every, let's say I have a task list model, I need to have like a class, task list color. Let's say, I can only use one color per list. I don't want to have duplicate colors. If you think about like a calendar or something, this could be a one-to-one relationship. Again, you might argue, why not just put the color into task list and have a unique key on it? That could work too. Again, one-to-one is not often something you run into, but it is a relationship that can exist between two entities or two models. All right.
Ankur, I have a quick question.
Yep.
So on line 7, the only reason that you have the user models foreign key user is because you are going to have, is that authentication purposes for multiple users having their own to-do list?
Not just for authentication. I mean, yes, I'm going to eventually use that for users, but theoretically, without authentication, I could just have a site that shows everyone's to-do list, but I want it to be associated to a user. So it might be like, pop up Platoon to-do list that's all public. I just want to see, hey, this list belong to Lily, does it belong to Kevin, does it belong to myself? So that's why I have a user, so I can identify who owns that list.
And then the only difference would be just displaying all of them or just displaying whoever's logged in.
Yeah, so if we wanted to add an authentication, again, I'm not sure if we'll have time for that, but if we did, then we could leverage the user item that we have here and figure out who's actually logged in and then show the task list based on that user only.
Okay, cool. So you actually don't need line 7 if you were just doing a very simple to-do list with you just,
Yeah, if you didn't have login,
then...
if it was just for me, like I'm creating my own site, that's going to be only my to-do list. Yeah, I don't need to specify that I'm the user if that's the only use case for it. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Let's kind of get to our task models. We'll have name models.charfield max length equals 64. Probably going to have, priority might be a field. How do I want to do this? Char field max length equals, let's make this a foreign key. So I want to keep this simple. This will be a simple review, but the idea was here, I was going to create another model called priority, and then I could foreign key it. Do you guys want to do that or no?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Yep.
Cool.
That was a yes. Okay. Priority. So this is going to be kind of like a fixed class or a fixed model. So we're going to see data into it. So let's do, just give it a level. Models dot autofill. Models dot char field max length. All right. So I'm thinking the priority is going to be like a text field that's going to say, high, medium, low that sort of deal. So that's data I'm going to seed in initially. That's not something that the user will be cutting. That's going to be kind of fixed into my database. I create maybe a fixtures file or do, the various ways we can seed a database. So I think level is all I want here. So I'm just going to put that there. And priority is going to be a foreign key now. Priority on delete. Oops, got my on delete up here. Models.cascade. Related name equals task lists. All right, so on delete is a required field. We just got to do it. Cascade is always what I go with. Cascade. And then related name. All right, so let's call this. This should be tasks. Let's ask the audience. Let's go with Tanya. Can you tell me what this related names field kind of does for me on the foreign key model?
Yeah, so basically what that does is under priority, class priority, you're gonna have like a, I guess like an invisible kind of like, yeah, where it's gonna just say tasks. So you can target it by saying priority.tasks and
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you, Tanya. So here we create a field on our task model. So each individual task will have one priority, right? It might be high, it might be low. Like each task will have that distinguished. If you want to look at the reverse side, like from the priority side, if you want to see every task that has a priority of high, we could call that priority instance dot tasks, and I'll list every single task that has a priority set to high. So yep, the related name just gives us the name of the reverse lookup, as in from the other table. This is an optional field, just want to make that clear. If you do not create this, Django has its default naming scheme. So I believe that is task set. Don't quote me on that. Again, I always use a related name, but again, I think it just puts the model name and then underscore set after it. So you can still refer to it. It's just you're using Django's naming, not your own. So I prefer to use my own. That's why related name. Again, optional, but recommended if you ask me. But yeah, so that's just, again, that allows you to give the reverse lookup how you access it from the other model. All right, so we have priority. Let's just wrap up our models. I think we're taking a little longer than I thought. Name priority, let's go with due date. Or yeah, due date. Those models, let's make it a date field, just change it up. So date field, I don't think we need anything in there. All right, so that's what my model is going to look like. Let's quickly create our done string methods because those are always good to have. So self return self.name. I'm just going to do name. Simple enough. And then string method here. Let's go do this. All right, so we have done string methods. So we're creating our models. Obviously, we could add more fields here, but I'm going to keep it kind of minimal here just to get our models done and over with. All right, so we're creating my models. Next, I need to do or make my migrations. So I'll do Python manage.py make migrations. All right, so notice it's going to create 3 models for me. Priority, task list. Then I want to do Python manage.py migrate. Let's get our models going. All right, I'm going to take this opportunity to create a super user. So Python manage.py create super user because the admin panel is the easiest to use for me to seed some data here. Yep, don't care about security. All right, let's get our server running again because we took that down. Manage.py run server. Okay, so if I refresh here, we should get something. All right, we got no routes, that's fine. Let's go to admin though. Let's log in. All right, so I don't have anything here. So if I want to actually register something, I need to go to my admin.py and register some models. So let's go from, where's my app called to do server app, imports models, import everything. We want to do admin.site.register and the models. We had, what models do we have? We had a task list model, admin.site.register. We had task model, and then admin sites. We also had a priority model. All right, so we have those three. If we refresh, that should allow us. Oh, that's not what I want to call it. Oh, I guess so. Django just tacks on an S to your models. Notice it says priorities isn't converted to IES. I'll live with that. I'm sure there's some way to control it. Let's add some priorities. So,
there's like a really easy way to fix it. If you want me to, I can like look it up real quick.
Sure, if you want to look it up. I'm curious, but yeah, I'm gonna proceed. But thanks. If you want to look that up, that'd be cool. All right, level. Let's create some levels. Let's go with flow. Create another medium. Save that. Add priority high. Let's add a couple more. Critical can be our highest level. And then
I just pasted it in the chat.
okay, cool. Thanks, Jason. All right, and let's create one more. So back burner. So that's gonna be my lowest priority, where if I have time for it, I'll get to it. Otherwise, never gonna get with that. So all right, so those are my priorities. That's just database I want to seed into my system. Again, this is not something the users can be create or CRUDing at all. They're just going to be using this assign it to some tasks. All right, let's create some data here just to get something seeded. So name will be weekend to do. Description stuff I need to complete this weekend. User admin, I guess admin's the only user I have. If I want to create some more users, let's create some users here. So I'll do, I'll join the party here. Password, I gotta have a legit password here, don't I? Let me say that. Cool. All right, so I created my user. Let's get a few more of you guys in here. So let's go with Brian, can be a user. Oh, this is not me. Not the user. Brian will be our username. Password will be same as mine because we don't care about security. Let's go with one more user. Do we have someone that starts with letter C? Anyone? Does no one starts with name C here? Let me see anyone. All right, next up is D, I guess. So Duncan, you're on deck. Password. Save that. All right, so we have 3 users in our system. Let's create a task list. Weekend to do, that can be tasks to me, I guess. Save that. Let's create a few tasks and then we'll see what this day looks like. So name will be vacuum. Priority, that's a low priority. If I don't vacuum, that's fine. Let's say I need to do that by whatever date, 18th. Save that. Let's create another task. Oh, looks like I'm missing something. I just realized it. Go back to my models. So I'm not associating a task with a task list in any manner, right? There's no relationship created because I forgot my foreign key here. So list will equal models.foreign key, task list model, right? Because we want to create some relationship. So task list model on deletes, this will be models.cascade. And then related name will be tasks. All right, so since I made a modification to my models, if you guys remember, we need to make migrations again. So Python manage.py, make migrations. All right, you might see this often. If you add a field, you need to tell Django how to handle existing records. So let's say for a one-off default, let's put it task list 1, cool. Then I need to migrate, so Python manage.py migrates. All right, so now let's refresh here. Oh, server's not up, of course. All right, so now we should have the ability to attach a task to a particular task list. That would make sense because we don't just have tasks floating out there. We want to organize them within task lists. So if I go back to my task models, I had vacuum, All right, that was defaulted to that. So let's add one more task. Let's say, I don't know, buy Xmas presents. That's probably a little higher priority because, you know, Christmas is coming out. Let's put that in medium. I still have a couple weekends, I guess. And I only have one weekend. Let's make that high. Let's make it high priority. Let's get that done by the 19th. List will be weekend to do. Let's add one more task and then we'll be done. So what else I need to do today? Say laundry. Priority, that's probably a medium. Want to get that out of the way. Let's get that done by 20th, I guess. List weekend to do. All right, so we have some data here. I'm just gonna, try to see how these are related. So again, we have foreign key with our task into our task list. Again, the foreign key sits in our task model because we have a one-domain relationship between task list and task model. There could be multiple tasks in one task list, but one task cannot span multiple different task lists. So that's why the foreign key sits in task model. That's why we don't need a join table because it's not a many-to-many relationship. So we just have a foreign key, which we just added here. All right, so we spent a lot of time on our models. I think we're good with our models. So that took a fair amount of time. Let's take a break here. After this, we're gonna tackle the next few steps, where our game plan go. So we did map model, so that's checked off. Serializers shouldn't be too hard to create. Again, Django REST framework makes it really simple. View sets, also very simple. Routes, pretty simple also via DRF. So DRF is going to make its grand entrance after our break here. So it's 10:34 here. Let's take a 6-minute break. So a little shorter than usual, but please be back at 10:40 and we'll continue along here.
Ankur, can you go back to the models page?
All right, so far we've completed our set up our Django project. We create our models. So as a reminder, we need to make migrations and then migrate. Optional was, we create some seed data. All right, so that's done. Now, again, it's easier with DRF. So let's just kind of power through the next 3 steps. So first thing I want to do is create a serializers file. Not out here, but serializers.py. That should be my app. Please move. There we go. Okay, so use serializers. I'm going to import from REST_framework serializers import model serializer. I also need my models here. So from to do app.models import task list and task. So I don't need a serializer for my priority model because again, that's going to be fixed data. That's not data I need to CRUD. So I'm not going to create a serializer for priority. Or do I need one? I guess I need one because I have a foreign key. Sorry. So the reason I need it is because I have a foreign key into that table. So I'm going to do a serializer for it. Let's create our serializers now. So this will be class task list serializer, kind of a long word. And here it's from model serializer. And then we want to do a class meta. And we want fields and models. So the model for this would be task list. Fields would be whatever we want to expose through a serializer. So again, fields would be an array. And what do we have on here? We had name, we had description, name, description. What else do we have? We had a user. And then we also have an ID, so we could pass the ID along. All right, so that'll be my task list serializer. Let's create our task serializer. Just gonna do some copy and pasting here. All right, so task is our model for this. Fields were ID and name. Is there a question?
Yes. Is there a reason that you didn't have to import user into your model? Is it because you're using the one that they create, so it's automatically in here too?
That's a good question.
Because you're referencing it in line 9.
Yeah, let me actually take off priority here. So without this, I think it's going to reference primary keys, and that's going to be totally fine. If I want to actually deserialize like my user model and show like the username, password, etc., then I would need to have a serializer for my user also. So let's figure out if we want that or not. But for sure, I need these two items. So task serializer, task model, task. What do I call my models here? Oh, all right. I don't know why I call them model here. I'm going to get rid of this because usually don't want model on there. So task and task list. So I need to do a mic migrations. Happens Python manage.py make migrations. Just want to rename some stuff. Task list model. Task list model not defined. Admin panel. Sorry, I named these poorly. Again, I could name it with a model on there, but usually we don't. So I think I'm just talking and typing too much. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Thank you. Python manage.py models. All right, just rename my models. Nothing crazy going on there. All right, so now they're called task lists and task. A little easier to say. All right, so task is there. All right, so this has, what do we have in here? So we had a name of the task. We also had the list it belonged to, and then we also had due date, I think. Due dates. All right, so those are the fields from our task. So given our task list, let's we create our serializers. Again, I'm not going to deal with my user or priority, but I did have priority here. Because that's just going to be foreign keys. It should be able to just show the foreign key and not anything more. So let's go to our views.py. Here we need to import our serializers that we just created. So it's going to be from to do server app.serializers import task list serializer and task serializer. All right, we're going to create something called view sets. So this is, again, Django REST framework, making our lives easier. Again, hopefully you guys understand what the view sets kind of offer to you. We did it all manually before, where we created our, our list page, our detail page, our edit, update, and create pages. That was, kind of tedious, but the point of doing that was to show you what's going on behind the scenes with view sets. So if I do from REST framework view sets, import model view set, class task list view set, model, it's going to inherit from model view set. We need two things on here. One is the Serializer class. That's going to be task list serializer. What's the other thing we need here? Query sets. Query sets is going to be task list dot objects dot all. It's like we need to import our models. So from to do models, import task list and task. Okay, so we imported our serializers, our models, and the view set from REST framework.viewsets. So this is going to handle all the complicated logic for us. Task view sets. Inherit from model view sets. It's going to look very similar to our task list view set, except our model is going to be task, and this should have been task list. All right, so we just got to specify what serializer we want to use and what model we want to use, and then our view set should do the rest of the work for us. So that's all we need to do for our view sets. Pretty simple. Last thing we want to do is wire up our URLs. So let's start in our project settings and point to our application. So we need to include or import the include function that I can't spell. Path will be, what do we want to call this? So let's call it to do slash, I'm going to call this API, keep it generic. Include, what do we call our app? To do server app dot URLs. All right, so we're just kind of redirecting our project URLs to point to do server app URLs. That's all we do with that the step here. Now that we have that reference here, we need to create our URLs, because that doesn't exist. That file doesn't exist, urls.py. Call it and copy this good stuff. All right, so we don't need the admin routing here, so that could go away. I don't think we need this include function either. We just need a path. So let's create some paths here. But with Django REST frameworks, we do it a little differently. So instead of creating an array like this, we're going to set this equal to something, but that something is going to be our router. So from REST framework, that routers, we want to import something called default router. Again, this is going to provide some URLs for us, so we don't need to create each URL by hand. So if we have default router, we're just going to hook that up to our view sets. So let's create a default router instance. That's a C++ syntax there. Default router. Then we need to create some registers here. So we'll do our task lists, singular. What view set do we need to use? We need to import view sets. So from to do app.views, import the view sets we just created. So we had task list view set and task view set. All right, so again, we're just following our game plan. So we did our models, create our serializers, create our view sets that uses our serializers. So view sets equal models plus serializer. Our serializer is basically model is based off our models. So we create that second. View set needs both of those. So that's why we do that afterwards. And then routes are going to use view sets. All right, so routes will be using our view sets here. So we have task list view sets. And then base name, I actually don't know. I always forget what the base name is used for, but task list will be our base name. Question. Love questions. Go for it, Susan.
Hi, I have a question about the view sets. I remember when we did full stack Django apps, we put most of our main logic in our views file. How does that compare to when we're just using it as a backend and using the view sets from DRF?
So you're talking about the views file, right? Where we had a lot more logic in here?
Yes.
Yeah, so good question. So again, the view set is doing all of that stuff that we used to do for us. So we can still do it. So if we're creating a full stack Django app or just using Django as an API, nothing really changes. Like we would still have a view here. Like if I had, a view called edit task page, I would do like a def, if you guys remember, edit task, we're taking a request, and then we had to, use that request and return some render, render some HTML page. So it'd be like, I forget the syntax for it already, but it'd be like templates or pages / edit page.html, right? Something like this. I think request is the first thing that goes in. Yeah. So we could do this all by hand. Our view sets are automatically doing this for us. I guess, and this is for full stack Django app. If this were an API, we could return, for example, a JSON response. That's a Django field. And then we need to convert our data to JSON and then respond with a JSON response. So again, we could do this by hand. The serializer will take care of the JSON part. The view sets will take care about the create detail page, the edit page, the update page. So again, a lot of magic just automatically built into model view set. But again, yeah, we could do this by hand. Nothing stopping us. One, it would be more time. The benefit would be, we get more customization as we get to kind of customize what routes we use, exactly what our data might look like. But again, this still gives us most of the functionality, and we can still customize it if we needed to. But yeah, so our URL patterns, we register our two view sets. So you do router.register, give it a base name, or again, I guess the base name is this. I'm not quite sure what it's used for. I need to read up documentation. But the main thing is you associate the view sets with the router. And then simply for URL patterns, you do router.urls. Right, so we create our router instance, associate view sets, get URL All right, so again, this is going to be all of our URLs that we need, but we're kind of fixed to what Django, what the Django REST framework is going to map for us. So again, if you forgot or just have no idea, that's where documentation comes in play. So let's search for default router DRF. All right, it's first results. So again, you guys can read the more details on it, but the key thing that I want to look at is this table. So there's simple router. I'm not sure key differences, but default router. So it's going to provide you some routes. This table is not the easiest to read, but your base path is going to support get and post. If you go to a particular ID, you have get, put, patch, and delete. So the lookup value here is going to be your ID. So task number 1 or task number 2, or task list number 1, task list number 2. That's where you do your get, put, patch, and delete. Okay, so that's what URLs. URLs is going to just give us a bunch of URLs that we can automatically navigate to. And yeah, that takes care of the last portion. Create our routes. Maybe step 5 would be test our framework. All right, so we want to make sure that all these routes actually work. So if we go back to our page that didn't exist before, that's not good. Python manage.py run server. Or we should just keep that up in a separate terminal. All right, so do we have the API here? All right, cool. So this looks familiar. Like this is not a bad sign. This is a good sign. Django is up and running. It's just telling us we gotta go to /API. All right, so notice these are all the routes that were created by the router, right? It's got some regex going on, it looks like. But notice we go to /task list. We go to task list and then put in a number, or it looks like a digit or letter. And that's going to be our list of our task list. I guess this name is kind of weird. But again, it's our list page where we see every single task list. We also have a detail page. We also have, I guess I don't know where edit pages are, but they exist somewhere. I guess, sorry, the detail page acts as the update page. So let's actually go to, why is this going to courses? Sorry. Looks like that was autofilled. So let's go to task-list. All right. So this is our landing page for our task list. Sorry for that poor naming, but again, we're just going to see every single task list that exists in our system. Currently, we only have one of them. Well, let's actually test our framework and see if we can create a new one. Let's go with week. Let's go with Jason. You're on my screen, so I'm just gonna say Jason's to-dos. Or actually, sorry, Jason, you're not going to be welcome because we had Brian in our system. So Brian's to-dos. Description, stuff that Brian needs to get done in December. So we're going to associate with Brian. Again, notice that we all automatically have this dropdown. That's what Django REST framework, that's what the front end is doing, because this is a foreign key. So we're limited to only users that exist. We can't freeform type in users. That's the whole point of a foreign key, where it's referencing data in a different table. So we're limited to these choices. Admin could be a choice, but no, admin's not going to get a to-do list, but we're going to associate that with Brian. So we post that. Notice that created some data that reflected it back to us. So if I refresh this page, do a GET request. So we did a post request to this URL. If I do a GET request, notice we see every single list in our system. Right.
Do we only see that because we're admin? Like if Brian logged in to
so this is
to-do list?
This is in our API. Like this is in our backend. So we're not doing any logging in right now. So yeah, we're just, yeah, I guess we're not the admin user. We're not even logged in as the admin user. We're just like an anonymous user that's querying our API. We have no authentication going on. So yeah, anyone right now that has access to our API would get a list of all the task lists. There's no security or anything going on right now. All right, so again, our post work, I just want to make sure we understand the DRF routing. So the base name that I gave was task list. That is why I go to API/task list, and then I can do a GET request or a post request. Again, I want to map that over to our documentation. So over here. So again, I could do a GET request or a post request to that landing site. Right, so if I do a GET, I get the list as in every single entry for that record. If I do a post to that very same URL, I'm doing a create action. So that's where I create new data and post it to that location. Additionally, if I go to a particular task list, so if I go to task list number 2, which we just created, which is Brian's to-dos, so I do /2, we should be taken to the detail page. I guess they call it instance, but it's the detail page where we have 4 actions available. So those 4 actions are, we could do a GET request, which we just did, to see the data for that particular item. So this is the detail page. That's a GET request. If we do a put, that is what's going to update our record. So again, we're not using post for updating, we're using the put method for updating. Again, this is all because Django REST framework has mapped this out. So we're kind of tied to what it's looking for. So if we do a put request, we are going to do an update, a patch, which we don't use too often, but it can be handy. If we send a patch request, that means we're doing a partial update. Just to review what that means is that when you're updating, let's say, one field of a model, you only need to send that field in the data. You don't need to send every other field part of a patch request. If you're doing a put, though, you need to specify all the fields, even if you only want to update one of them. And the last method we can send to this URL or to this route is delete. The delete method would, as you would guess, delete the record. Right. So again, our API kind of has a nice front end here. We could send a delete request by clicking the delete button. We could send a put request to update data. We can also do a patch somewhere. How do you do a patch on this page? You know what? I'm actually not sure how you do a patch. It is possible. And patch is valid. I don't know how you
Go up to the get, top right-hand corner.
Is it? Options? I don't know.
Maybe you should go to the raw data part. It might be in there.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Thanks, Omar. Yeah, so you can put in patch here. Looks like you can't do it from the HTML form for whatever reason. But okay, so get request. All right, so let's modify some data. So if we want to, again, update, we send a put. So let's say stuff that Brian needs to get done in December and January. He's got a couple months for this to-do list. So I do a put. Notice that updated my data. Again, just to highlight patch, we do this with Postman also. Patch, like let's say I deleted user and the name and the ID. If I try doing a put request, I'll probably get an error because it's looking for the other fields here. So I do a put. Notice you get a JSON parse expecting property name. Yeah, so it's looking for the name field, didn't get it. So it kind of yelled at me. But if I instead take this off and do, what was I trying to do here? Description, I think, is what we want to modify. Description, let's go back to stuff Brian needs to do in the next month. All right, so I do a patch. Again, that's only going to update this field. It's not going to look at all for other fields. So patch is just like partial update. Still got an error. That's not what I want. Right, let's type this. So stuff.
Hey, Encore, if you wanted to update the user, would it look for the ID of the user or the actual user's name?
Oh, you look for the ID because we're only using primary keys here. Names can be, again, duplicate, so we don't want to rely on that. So let's try patching this. I'm not sure. All right, patch worked. So notice I changed it to stuff to do. I didn't have to send any of these other fields for the patch. All right, so it looks like my API is working. We could also take a look at task, the task items. So if I go to /task, which is the name I gave it, again, I want to be clear, these are names that I specified in my routing. So since I called it task here, that's why I'm navigating to task. That's not a automatic, thing that Django did for me. I could name this donuts and it would work just fine, but usually want to have some sensible naming. So we go to /task, I just see every single task in my system across every single task list. So we go to that. Notice I get, vacuum, buy extra stress and laundry. Those are the 3 I created. To create a couple tasks for Brian's to-do list. So Brian, what's something you need to do in the next month? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I need to plant my winter garden.
Plants winter garden. Sounds cool. All right, so it's going to be Brian's to-do. Notice that this is not filtered, right? We could add this to my to-do list, but we're just creating a task. It's not automatically associated with a task list, but it's going to go to Brian's to-do. Brian, let's say you have until January 15th to complete that task. How high, what level of priority is this for you personally?
Yeah, maybe medium.
Medium, sounds good. All right, post that. All right, notice we created an item. So we posted to the very same URL that shows us all the details. So a GET request will show us every single task. So if I refresh this and do a GET request, That's every single task in the system. If I do a post request or post method to the very same URL, I create a new record. Again, this is based on the routing that's specified by Django REST framework. So we get or post to list or create data. All right, let's check out one last thing. So task/4, that's the item we just created. If we want to change this, let's say we want to change the due date, we could simply change due date to like the 22nd, do a put request, and notice that happens. So again, it looks like our API is working. Again, we're just using it from the Django REST framework API through the screen. But again, that's not how our users are going to be using this. Our users are going to get a front end for it. So speaking about front ends, let's get to creating that. So again, my API, giving it 2 thumbs up, maybe 1.5 thumbs up if we need to make some modifications later. But I think right now it's good to go. So let's get to our front end portion of this. So I'm going to create a new folder outside of my backend folder. So click here, new folder. Let's call that front end to stick with our naming here. And this is going to be our React app. Hopefully you guys didn't forget about React, or good old friend React. So I'm going to create a new terminal for it. We don't need our virtual environment, so I'm going to deactivate. I think VS Code did that for me automatically. All right, so CD into my front end folder. Let's do npx create React app. And while we're doing this, let's make sure we tackle any Django questions because this takes a little bit of time. Let's call this to do site. Sure, that's a good enough name. I usually like using dashes for React projects. Okay, so all this takes, it's 2 hours. Were there any questions from the Django side? Again, everything that we tackled, we kind of summarized over here. Gameplan.py. So first thing, obviously we set up our Django project. Hopefully none of that's new to you guys. We create our models. We use Django REST framework. So again, to use Django REST framework, we need to pip install Django REST framework. Maybe put this above in our setup since we did that. So virtual environment, pip install Django REST framework. You guys know the rest of the stuff, right? We did Django and PsychoPG, but to this we need to add the REST framework to install. All right, so that's an additional thing you need to do when you want to use Django REST framework. Otherwise, you can just use Django and do whatever you want to do. All right, any questions that came up from our API backend? Again, the models took a while because we discussed them, but usually it shouldn't take too much time if you know what fields you need. Again, it does take some thought process. I'm not saying you should kind of just blaze over them. Make sure you think about how the relationships work, what fields you need, because you don't want to be modifying your models too often. Especially if you think about it, like we haven't created the front end yet, so we're okay. But if you've created a front end and then you decide to change like your serializers or change your data, your front end gonna need to change also. It's usually hard to keep those in sync, right? Like if your user has version 5 of your front end, but you have version 6 of your back end, you're gonna get incompatibility. Or like you're sending maybe extra data, or you rename the field and your front end is not ready for that. Bad things are gonna happen. So always want to make sure your data is good to go before you get your front end up and running. All right, so we're a happy hacking message. So I think we're ready to go for our front end. Last call for questions on the API side. Anything you want to go over? You guys understand all the magic that Django REST framework is doing behind the scenes? And don't just say, all right, it's doing stuff, I'm going to accept it. In this case, we do want to know kind of how the views are working, how the detail page works, how the edit page works. Again, we did it ourselves. We had to create a form and kind of do all that grunt work ourselves, but the view sets take care of that for us.
All right. Yeah, I have a quick question. If your end
nice.
goal is to deploy this somewhere, at this point, would you deploy your API, or would you create your React app first and then deploy everything together?
I always like testing on my local machine first. So yeah, I'm going to keep this on a local machine. Like my last concern is Heroku or publishing it, but eventually, yeah, if this were something I wanted to put on the web, I need to get to that initially. But I just want to make sure it's working. Like again, I don't want to deal with CORS issues, Heroku issues like those. Those are obviously something we might have to deal with, but nothing that we have to deal with at this point. Okay, so backend is complete. So check that off. Let's go to our front end. Front end is going to be our React app. So let's get reacting.
Just one quick question. For that JWT token auth versus the standard cookie stuff, is that something that's going to be necessary for our project, or is that kind of an optional thing depending on what we'd like to do?
For your personal project, you're not required to have user logins. We'd encourage it, but that is, again, we want to focus on all the other material from like the last 10 weeks. Again, authentication was like the last thing we covered. Again, most sites probably won't want them, right? Like you think about any professional site out there, Amazon, whatever, there's user logins. So it'd be nice if you guys can have them, but that should be your last concern for your personal project. So yeah, again, we can add this in here, but right now I just want to get my front end working, and then if we have time, we can add in authentication. But yeah, good question. It's not required for your personal projects. So don't worry too much about it, but it is nice to have. All right, to-do site, let's get hacking here. So let's just start up our server. Let's see if that actually works. npm starts. Of course, we got an error because I'm not in my right folder. I need to go into cd to-do sites. All right, npm start here. All right, we're good to go. It gets booting up. All right, taking here. So my backend slow up and running, so we'll be able to mess with that. But React is loading, takes a little bit of time, but there we go. Our familiar hypnotic React logo. So looks like my server's running. I'm gonna delete a few things. I don't want that logo in my project, so say goodbye to it. Go to app.js. Again, this is what's being rendered right now. Don't need to render that for my project, so it's gonna clean up my app.js. Again, app is our topmost node. That's where we're gonna start writing our React application. All right, well, let's get to reacting now. So here, I don't know what I want to do yet, but I do know I need to create a page. So I'm going to create a folder called pages. Pages would be called that. And then a few pages I know I need to create already. So task lists page would be one of them for sure. I want a task page. What else do we need? So our homepage could show every task list. That's probably what our homepage would show. Okay, let's see. Oh, we probably want to actually create another page for that. So let's create a task list summary, or let's go with all task list all. That's what I'm gonna call it. I want to put a page on there. Rename. Task list all page, and we probably want, sorry, so task list, trying to think about what this is going to look like. All right, let's just start with these basics. Excuse me. So for this, I'm going to use the React router. That is something pretty simple to use. I don't want to do anything more complicated. So for that, let's go into that folder. So deactivate. CD into front end, CD into to-do site. All right, so here I want to do, what do I want to do here? I want to npm install React router DOM. All right, so that's gonna do some downloading. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. But assuming that all works correctly, I need to import browser router. So these are just common things we always use with the browser router. So browser router. We also need something called routes, and then something called route singular from React router DOM. All right, so let's get our routes set up. So browser router is what we create here. Inside of that, you need a routes component. This is just how the router works. Inside of there, you want individual routes. So let's say exact path equals, let's say our homepage has no base URL, so let's be a slash. What element do you want to render? Well, the element that I would like to render would be the task list all page. So it's going to show every task list to us here. Obviously, you need to import some things. So let's do our pages, import task list all page from pages / task list all, import, what else? Task list page. from pages. Task list page. I got one more for now. We have the task page from pages. All right, so a lot of typing here. Task page. All right, so we create routes from. So we have the task list all page is what I called it. Not sure if I will like that naming later, but whatever. So path to the particular task list will be task that list and then ID. Call it list ID. And we could also have a task dash list slash list ID slash task task ID. All right, so we're creating our nested routing on our front end. Our back end does not have nested, like those nested URLs. With GRF, the nesting, you can nest URLs using Django REST framework. It gets a little more complicated. It's not necessary, right? Because the user is going to be navigating to the front end URLs. They're not going to care how the back end URL is going to work. So for this, I'm going to go to the task list page and a task page appropriately. Any questions on setting up the router here?
What does the exact property do?
That's something that we use for version 5 of the router. I think I've seen them in examples for version 6. I think it's saying match this exactly, don't match like partially. I'm probably making that up sort of, so let's just read documentation. Nope, not YouTube. I want to go to React router, routes, components. All right, so this is version 5. Let's read what version 5 was doing. And then let's see if it exists in version 6. So where's this? React router. Right. So there's this exact rule.
And also, I kind of missed it, but what version did you install?
So I'm using version 6. So that's the latest. So I didn't specify the version. So I get the latest version, which is version 6. This is documentation for version 5. So I want to point that out. I like their documentation. So they have an exact, which is a Boolean. When true, only match if the path matches exactly. So in this case, let's see. The path is /1. Wait, I'm trying to figure out why this matches or not. So okay, so in this case, we have nested routes. So /1/2, if exact is set to true, it's going to say no, this does not match because it's looking for exactly /1. If the exact value is not provided, so if we didn't provide exact, that will match 1/2 as part of this URL. So what we specified here, it's saying match exactly this and nothing extra, nothing less. If we didn't have exact, theoretically, it could match something else that's after a slash.
So Ankur, do you need the exact in version 6 of the React router DOM?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's look for React router v6. All right, so this is version 6. I believe I've seen it in this, but I could be mistaken. So I always have trouble navigating this. So I go to, yeah, again, I don't like their layout here. Docs, API reference.
You don't need it anymore for version 6, Ankur. It used to be that the order of the routes mattered. That's why exact was really important, because if the first part of the URL matched, it would automatically go to that route first. So the order mattered, but now in V6, they fixed that.
All right, cool. Thank you, Irmo. Yeah, so I think Tom's mentioned in the past exact's not needed. I just put it there. I don't think it hurts. Like it doesn't throw an error. So I just always type it in there just because that's my safety. That's what makes me feel comfortable. But okay, let's try it without it. Hopefully that doesn't change anything. Susan.
Since we're talking about versions of the React library, do we have to add that to our requirements folder? Is that only in the back end?
Great question. Great question. Yes. So yes, the answer to that is yes, we only need to do that for Django. So we needed to manually create the requirements.txt by doing pip freeze and then the outer carrots and then specify the file you want to create. For React apps, it's kind of done for you in package.json. So that's updated already. So it's kind of nice. So I installed, React router DOM. It automatically put in the version and everything. So again, React projects are a little more automatic in terms of versioning and creating that dependencies file for you. Yep, good question though. Great to clarify that. All right, so let's go back to our app.js. Got too many files open. Let's close some backend files here. Let's do a quick close others. All right, so we have our app.js. Again, our router usually is going to sit in that top level component. Again, it doesn't have to, it could be somewhere else, but usually you want to put it in your top level because that's the first thing that your app will load. So we have our routes defined. Let's implement some of these components that have not been created. So task list all page. Let's create our functional component. So we want to do React functional component. This is called task list all page. Again, the goal of this page is going to show basically every single task list that exists, how we show the name and provide a link to individual task list pages. So like I'm saying task list a lot, but this is where we're going to use our backend to get some data. So let us code this up and then we'll need to add some API calls. So let's get to this. So we're going to create a state value, const task lists, plural. So again, it's going to be multiple task lists, set task list. Again, any React questions come up, please do ask. So hopefully you guys understand the idea of state values. We can import that from React using use state. This will initially be an empty array or empty list here. We're also going to need an effect. So effect, this is where use effect comes into play. I know there's requests for talking about use effects, so definitely we'll spend some time on here. But the first thing you want to understand is use effect takes in two parameters. One is a function. The second is a dependency array. All right, obviously they're not going to be strings, but I'm just putting this, maybe I should put them in comments. Comments seem good. All right, so use effect takes in two parameters. The second one is optional. So let me put that in square brackets. All right, the second one is optional, but usually you're always going to have it. So usually always include. All right, the first one is required. So that function, this is what's going to trigger based on something that happens in your application. So this logic will only happen when something else happens. So it's a reaction to something else, in effect. So if I create my use effect here, and my first parameter is going to be a function. So let's create, we usually just create an anonymous function. It gets a little harder to read, but you guys should be pros, hopefully, with that arrow functions. So I'm just creating a function in line here, like right here. Just creating a function on the spot. And what is this function gonna do? I'm not sure. Dependency array, as you might guess, is going to be an array of some sort. We'll talk about the finer points here once we get to coding here. But why did I create a use effect? Well, normally we put our API calls into a use effect, as in once our page loads, then we'll make our API call if we have any API calls to make. So here, let's call it get task lists. And the important thing here is that this is going to be an async function. So I'm going to put the async keyword, specifying that this function can behave asynchronously. It's going to be a fat arrow function here. All right, so get task lists. The job of this function is to make an API call, which is asynchronous. Again, we don't know when that response will come back. Again, our server might take an hour to get back to us. Who knows? So that's why this whole process is asynchronous. We make an API call. When the server responds, whenever it does, we'll get some data back. Once we get that data back, we are ready to populate our state value with task lists. All right, so we're gonna make a request here. So right now we don't have any function, so I'm just gonna kind of stub it in here. So I'm gonna call, put some comments in here, call API to get task lists, get some data back. And then we want to update our internal state value. All right, so we have three things to do here. We need to make a call to our backend, wait for that response and get the data back. And then finally, when we get the data back, assuming it's good, we need to probably validate or check for it. Then we want to update our task list. So those are the three things that get task list is going to do. Again, we're creating a function here. We actually want to call it from use effects. All right, just to, again, review this. We mentioned this, I think, last week, but the reason we need to do it this way is because use effects should not be asynchronous, as in we can't create an async function at this level, if I could ever spell that correctly. We do not want to just create an async function here. It might seem tempting, like, why do we just create this intermediate function? The reason is because we cannot make this async. Let's keep getting tooltips up here. That's why we make this synchronous and create an async function that we call within it. Hopefully that kind of makes sense why that's a little different. So useEffects is going to behave synchronously. It's going to call this function and then complete. It's not going to wait anything here. This function, though, is going to do some waiting for us. All right, so that's what our useEffects is going to look like. Obviously, we need to fill in this portion, which we'll do. But once we get some data, we could probably render something. So let's do render task lists. It's going to be a function call. Render, what do you call this? Render helpers. All right, so we have a function that we're going to create called render task lists, like that anonymous function. Right, so this, we're going to assume that this is going to be an array. Again, I'm going to emphasize this again in case there's any people that have not been keeping up to speed. Definitely research and understand all the array methods that exist out there. Sorry, not all of them, but the main ones are map, filter, I guess to a lesser extent, reduce. So again, map we use all the time. So if you're still at this point confused about map, please ask questions / look up documentation, because you should have been using it at this point. Not trying to scold anyone, but again, you should be fully familiar with map and filter and how they work. So here I'm going to create let LMs. We're going to map over our state values. So our state value is called task lists.map. Again, just to reiterate what map is doing, map is going to effectively be like a for loop through every element in our list. And we're going to pass that to a function that's going to do additional processing. So here we're going to get a task list item. Right. So again, this is just a variable. We can name that whatever we want to. That's going to be passed to our function here. Now our function, so map, what map effectively does is take your initial elements and creates a brand new array with new elements based on your original elements. So in this case, we're getting task list data. We're going to create some React elements for every single task list that exists in that initial array. So we're going to return JSX here. So let's do return probably list items. The list items will have task list name, and that's pretty much it. But I want to create a link. So here I'm going to import link. Again, this is something coming from our router from React router DOM. Cool. All right, so link will let us kind of navigate internally. Again, we don't want to use A tags because A tags kind of reset our application. So I'm going to create a link tag. And I'm going to surround this item. Where do you want to go to? Anyone remember where we need to go to?
Hunter, I have a question, kind of a side tangent a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just going to fill this out and then we'll get to your question. So let's go back to our route. So we want to go to task / task list / the ID name. So that's the ultimate link we want to provide here. So I go back to task list all. We're going to go to / task list. That's the route I created. Then an ID. So the ID in this case will be task list.id. Right. So the ID of the task list is what the URL should go to, so that we can use the URL later to fetch that particular task list. So in this case, we'll provide that here. That's probably not what I want. So this needs to be in curly braces. We want to do string interpolation here and then $. All right. So again, we're using anything inside of curly braces within JSX. This is just JavaScript. That's why we can do string interpolation within curly braces, but we can't just simply do that without curly braces. So if we try to do it here, notice we get this mean red error. That's because backticks don't exist in JSX. They only exist in JavaScript. So anytime you want to write JavaScript within JSX, you need to use curly braces to specify, hey, I'm just writing straight up JavaScript here. Okay, Guillermo, what was your question?
So I have a question. I have a design question in terms of when should you use navigate, as in use navigate, and when should you use the link to tag? Is there like some hard rules that we need to follow? Because that confuses me sometimes.
Yes, there is. Excellent question. So we do have both functionality. We have navigate, which is a component that you can use. Also link. So we're using link right here. When do you use one over the other? Great question. They are similar, but the key difference is a link is something your user is going to click on. When you use navigate, you're automatically going somewhere. As in you're sending your application to a location. So if I wanted to automatically navigate to like a task list page, I use navigate here. And this would automatically navigate to that page right now. The user is not going to do anything to get there. If you want to provide a link where the user can click on something, that's when you use the link tag. So the link is like a hyperlink, navigate is like a redirect automatically.
Okay, something I understood that, but I guess what gets real confusing to me is you can easily do an on-click navigate. So choices, design, whatever you're feeling at the moment.
On-click navigate. I'm not actually sure how that works. The navigate allows you to just automatically navigate. I think on-click just exists for every element. I could do on-click for, you know, a label or a checkbox or whatever. So I think
yeah,
just like allowing the user to click on an element and then it's going to do some action. But the navigate itself, if you specify a to, it's going to just redirect you to there automatically. So I think if you're using navigate and then an on-click, I think that's working, but not the intended purpose of navigate. Because again, you could have an on-click in any element. You could have a checkbox where they click on it and then you're taken to a page, right?
Okay, that makes perfect sense because I sometimes you could just throw an anonymous function on an on-click navigate, but I guess I'm using that poorly and then change that. Okay,
so
that makes sense.
If you were using a navigate, I think, if you don't provide a to, it's not going to navigate to anywhere. So then it's going to wait for an on-click if you specify an on-click handler. Yeah, but again, normally when you want to provide a user-facing link, you use link. If you want to automatically redirect for the user, you use navigate. Were there any other questions out there? I thought I saw maybe a hand raised.
No, that was my question, is that in the past we'd used navigate with like buttons and on click to change direction instead of wrapping the button in a link. So I guess it's kind of either or. Gotcha.
Okay, cool. All right. So in our render helpers, we create a new array that's going to create, I think it's going to actually have JSX elements. We need to return that. So return LMs. We could probably just do return statement up here, but I like breaking it apart. What else do we need to do here? So again, we call render task list. We probably want to nest this within an unordered list. We are creating list items. We're probably due for a break also. I'm aware of that. Okay, so save this. All right, nothing here because we're not navigating. So we don't have anything to show, right? Because our initial task list is empty. We could seed it with some dummy data. So let's just try that. Let's say task list will have, what is this going to be? Main object, put something called name. Blah, and then another entry. Yes, another entry. Donuts will be our name of this list. I'm just trying to see if our rendering is working correctly. So dummy data here. These are supposed to be task lists, but we only have names specified. We also need ID, I bet. So ID will be 1. ID would be 2. All right, so let's see if this actually renders or if I need to work on my rendering somehow. All right, I got one error or one warning. That's fine. I know why that's. All right, there we go. So notice we got a list, not the best formatted, like these dots are over here. So I probably need to deal with that over the break. But we have our list. We can, if we hover over it, notice, I don't know, it's pretty easy to see. Bottom left of my screen, it's telling me where if I click on this, it's going to take me to task list /1 or task list -2. So it's basing it off the IDs. So if I went to those pages, I should be taken to the task list page, but we've not coded that up yet. So I think it's a good time to take a break. So it is 10:35. Let's take a good 10-minute break. We've not had a good long break here, so let me pause recording. No questions? You guys understand what we're tackling here? Okay. All right, I'm going to assume there's no questions there. All right, so we coded up some dummy data here, right? We got blah and donuts, but we don't want to use dummy data. We want actual data relevant to our users. So I'm going to get rid of our dummy data, put back an empty array. Let's focus on use effects. So again, this is probably the hardest thing to kind of fully understand how it's working, why we use it, how it works. But again, use effects, the simplest way I explain it is we want to do something after something else happens. That's the way I kind of just imagine what use effects is used for. So after something happens, which is kind of what this dependency array specifies, we want to do something additional. Now we need to do this because a lot of stuff in React is asynchronous, right? We can't simply do, all right, we're going to do item number X, and then we're going to do item number Y right away. Again, we can't do that because sometimes what we need to do, we need to wait for X to complete before Y can actually execute. And since it's asynchronous, we don't know when X may complete. That's why use effect exists in the first place, where we are going to say, we want to complete X. We don't know when X is going to be completed, but whenever X does complete, we want to proceed to do something else. All right, so we need to do step 1 here, which is call our API. We don't have any API calls created, so I'm going to create a new folder in my to-do site. I'm going to call it API just because that's what name I chose. In my API, I'm going to create another file and call it to-do API.js. All right, I'm going to create my friendly function called try catch fetch. Again, I created so much, I probably should just copy and paste it from somewhere. Try catch fetch, but it's always good to write it by hand, just get practice. All right, try catch fetch. What is this going to do? It's going to take in a URL and some init object optionally. So default value for that would be null if no one passes anything in. This is let's make it an anonymous function. So we'll go here. It's going to be asynchronous. That's very important. Fat arrow. Let's get try catch fetch going. So first thing would be a try. Then I'm going to catch something, which might be an error. I will console.error that error, and then return null if we get an error. But in most cases, we hopefully won't get an error. So we're going to do our usual fetch request. So I'll do const response. Again, these are just variable names. I want to point that out. Hopefully you guys are understanding that. So if I do async, oh, sorry, not async, awaits fetch and the URL and the init object that was passed to us. All right, so again, fetch is an asynchronous action. It's making a request and going to wait for a response. Oh, our application still is not going to, it's not going to freeze up. Our application still has, users can still scroll through it, can do some other stuff while that data is being given back to us. Whenever we do get that data back, we need to check the response to make sure it's valid. So we do usually do response.ok. Let's ask my good friend, Matt Robinson, since I just looked at your background. Can you tell me what response.ok is signifying? Do you remember?
Are you talking to me?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry,
what was?
did I call you Matt?
Yeah,
You called me Matt Robinson, who's
Sorry.
definitely not me, but
Michael Robertson,
it's also here.
not Matthew Robinson. Kind of similar names. See where I get lost, but Michael Robertson. Sorry, thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah, so I'm doing response.ok here. Do you remember what this .ok actually does? Like what type of value is it? And also what does it signify?
So that's like the status of I think it's actually called status, and it's something within the response that is sent along with the rest of all the information that says, hey, everything went through and it's an okay response versus like an error response.
Yep, yeah, so it's associated with the status code. So again, if you remember your status codes, let's do a quick Google, get a good refresher. So HTTP response codes, cats. So HTTP cats is a site. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but so there's a bunch of status codes. Anything in the 200 range means okay. So there's 200, which is the most popular one. Anything in 200 range means you got what you wanted. 300 range means like it's a redirect or something that's okay, but like not what you expected. So like, moved permanently, see other, not modified. 400 means that you screwed up, as in the user, you either tried to do something that's unauthorized, as in you weren't logged in. Bad request means something doesn't exist. So you try to go to a page that doesn't even exist. 500, we get down there. 500 means the server screwed up, as in you did everything fine. Maybe the server crashed, maybe the server's not up. So like you might get internal server error, gateway timeout if something taking too long. So there's different status codes associated with requests. Anything in the 200 range is when okay will be true. So this is a Boolean value. Oops. This is a Boolean, and then true means that you got a status code between 200 and 299. We could actually inspect the status code if we wanted to. So if I did, dot status, I could check if I got, something that's equal to 200. This would be fine, but this is only limiting to 200. So the other status codes, like where we had, if you create an object, you can get a 201 back instead of a 200. Well, I want to, that's still a good response. So instead of coding up all these responses kind of individually, I can just do response.ok, which that's going to be true if we get a status code in the 200 range, meaning we got what we expected back. False just means, everything that's in the 100, 300, 400, or 500 range. All right, so okay, again, is going to be true only if we get a 200 response back. That's what we are expecting. So assuming that's true, we could proceed to return awaits response.json. So again, just to clarify here, this JSON method is another asynchronous method. So we got two asynchronous methods that we're calling here. The first is fetch. So we need to wait on that. So we're making a request. The server is going to take its good old time and give us a response when it's good and ready. So we're waiting for that. The second thing is, which is not as intuitive, is this JSON method. It's taking a response data. So whatever in like that, the message body, it's converting that to JSON format. Now, to me, that sounds like you do that synchronously. Like, I don't know why that's asynchronous, but for large amounts of data, this processing could take a while. So it is an asynchronous method. So it's, it could take a while. We don't know when it's going to complete. So our application can continue on while that's potentially processing. But whenever that JSON is kind of created for us, we're going to return it from our function. Otherwise, if we get an error, let's just throw. Again, throw is going to be caught by a catch statement. So I'm going to throw new error. Let's just say bad response. And we're going to show some of our error code. So again, we have access to response.status. We also have access to response.status text. Where is this all coming from? You guessed it. Again, we've seen this page before, but just to highlight again, response HTTP. I'll find it. Yep. And these are status codes. So again, this is just one way over, but in non-cat form. So again, that's range. What do I want to go to? Response fetch. Yep, response. Again, Mozilla is, I think, the official documentation for a lot of this, or I don't know if it's official, but it's good enough. So again, response object is what we get back from our fetch request. This has a bunch of fields on it. So again, we're using read response.ok. That's exactly what we talked about. A Boolean indicating whether response was successful, i.e. status range 200, 299. We also have status. We also have status text. So again, that's where I'm getting these fields from. I'm not just making them up. They are documented and exist in this object. All right, so in the event I get a non-OK response, I'm going to throw an error, which is just going to go to this part of my try catch. So I'll print out that error and then return null. All right, so again, try catch fetch, something I just create all the time. But now we actually want to create our API calls. So I'm going to do const get or fetch task lists. Fetch all task lists. This will take in nothing, but it's going to be an async method. We're calling try catch fetch async. Takes in nothing. We're going to specify the URL. It's going to be base URL. I need to define that, not base. Let's create it right here. Const base URL is going to equal. Right now, I'm pointing to my local machine. So my server's running on my local host. So it's http// localhost. Port 8000. Again, that's where my backend server is running. /API. That's the base prefix I gave it. Again, hopefully you guys are able to pick out what is like default naming versus naming that we created. So I created /API/task lists, list singular, I think. So I think that's my base URL for task list, but I want to go to API. So that's my base URL. I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to tack on task list / because I'm going to be using the same base URL for getting individual task objects later on. So I don't want that to have the task list in the URL. So we do base URL plus task list. That's what I want to navigate to or request from. And then I'm going to return await try catch fetch, pass it the URL. Any questions on calling our backend here? Do you guys
Ankur, yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to verify in our backend, Was it in the project dot? It's in the project folder URLs where you specify that API leading part
Yep.
after the end. Okay, right there.
Again,
All
this is
right,
just
that's
a
where I
choice.
was a little.
Yeah, good to good to clarify. But yeah, I can leave this blank, but I like having some like base, routing in case I have multiple apps or whatever. But yeah, that's a name I chose. But that is where it's coming from. Yeah, it's good identification there.
Thank you very much, Anker.
Yep, thank you for your question. All right, so where were we? React app. That's not where we were. We were coding something. All right, our API. So again, I'm going to pause here because again, a lot of stuff we went over here. Any questions on fetch? Again, fetch is not easy to understand, so I'm not saying it's something we should glaze over. So if you have any questions, understand that fetch returns a promise. The await keyword means it's going to wait for that promise to resolve. So again, we talk about promises. You don't need to worry too much about focusing on them. It's a complicated concept. But just understand a promise is going to take some time to resolve. When it does resolve, the await keyword is going to say, all right, I'm going to give you the result back when that's done. All right, so again, we fetch, make a request, wait on a response. When we get the response, we process it, convert it to JSON, and return that JSON data. JSON is a format. So I know someone mentioned this in the review request, so definitely want to make sure we're clear on this. JSON is just a format. It's kind of like HTML is a format, XML is a format, even like plain text is a format. So JSON is just a particular format that's used to transmit data in like a common language, right? So like right now we have Python in our backend and we have JavaScript in our front end. Those can't automatically just like pass data back and forth. So we have the intermediate JSON format that basically is kind of like a universal language where anything Python application, C++ application, JavaScript application knows how to process JSON. It's just like a format that's, again, universally agreed upon so that we can send data in JSON from Python, convert it to JSON, send it to JavaScript, and then Java can say, okay, this is JSON. I know how to unpackage it for my particular language. All right, so that's why we use JSON. That's why it's commonly used. It's not the only format that exists or can be used, but it's pretty common where like, most sites use JSON to transmit data. Therefore, more sites are going to use it just because that's kind of the standard. All right, so again, just JSON is a format used to kind of transmit data between different applications because again, those applications might be coded in different languages. This is all language agnostic, right? I don't know what my server's coded in. It could be any number of languages. It doesn't matter for my front end. My front end just knows, all right, I'm going to get some JSON formatted data. I know how to deal with JSON format. JavaScript does not know how to deal with Python format or any other language format. But JSON is, again, a common language, so that's why we use JSON to package data and then unpackage it from each endpoint. Any questions on JSON?
Anker, not specifically on JSON, but on line 5 for fetch, the second value, the init, that's like, what is that? I know that is what you said the second field is. That's like the payload or whatever, right? If I understand correctly. But I'm trying to like what does init stand for? Do you know?
I assume just initialization. That's usually what init stands for. Again,
okay, that's
the
what
reason
I thought.
I
But
use init here is because documentation. So if I go to fetch, again, the only reason I've started using init is because the documentation has that as a parameter. So if I look at fetch, nope, that's not where I want to go. Where I want to go here, fetch. Okay, so look at fetch. Resource is the first parameter. I call it URL, so I guess I'm not matching that name. But the second parameter is called init, so that's why I call it init. So again, it's an object containing any custom settings. So I guess it's not really initialization. I don't know why they call it init. We can call it, params. Again, we can call it whatever we want, but I just go with init just by tradition. Let's call it params. It doesn't really matter what we name it. But yes, again, that's optional. So if you guys read documentation, again, optional. If you're doing a simple GET request, you don't need to specify this params object. Let's actually call it OBJ. So we know it's going to be an object if we pass it. But yeah, we're making a simple GET request to any endpoint. We just need the URL. That's the default method. If we need to specify anything additional, like, hey, is this a post request, a put request? If we need to send data in our message body, that's where the params object will be used. But currently it's defaulting to null because our get request doesn't need a params object. Okay, so we're making a fetch request. Again, just wanted to stare at this code for a bit, but I think we've stared at it for long enough. So now we just send in a URL and then wait on that response. All right, so now we need to export. So I'm gonna, I would usually forget to export, but this time I happen to remember. Let's do const export stuff. I want to export fetch all task list and then export default export stuff. Okay. Yeah. So we have access. We should have access to this one method from my API file. So I go back to where we were before, which is pages task list all page. Let's import that. So API import task. I did not capitalize it, did I?
Hunter, what's the difference between export and default export?
I am not qualified to answer that. I believe export default means it's gonna export. If you, I'm not gonna answer that because I don't actually know. But I know a rough understanding of it, but I always do export default so I could kind of export an entire object. I think if you don't do export default, you need to specify exactly what on the other end. You need to do deconstruction, I believe is the difference.
Got it, thank you.
But again, don't quote me on that. I was kind of just somehow mentally remember I need to do something. So this is called to do API. Looks like I did not capitalize it, but I'm gonna capitalize it here. To do API. Was there a hand raise?
Yeah, I raised my hand, sorry.
Oh, go for it. You guys don't need to apologize for questions. I welcome them.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I've seen in other React projects, they make their API calls from the components where they're going to use the information, but I know that here in Platoon, you put all your API functions into the API folder. Have you seen it the other way? I kind of liked that way because I don't know, it seemed like a direct place to be doing that from instead of, but I can understand it organizationally putting it into an API folder. Is this like, and I mean, this was maybe a year and a half ago that I started seeing it that other way, but is this a more correct way of doing that?
I would not go that far in saying this is more correct. I do it this way just because organizationally, I like having all my API functions in one place. I think you were saying you've seen it so that the fetch request is like right here, like on this line, instead of having like a separate function you call. Is that correct?
Yeah, you have it in your, like in the component, or if you're going to use it in like multiple components, you have it in the highest ranked one.
Gotcha. Yeah. Again, I'm going to say this is purely for my organizational sake. Again, doing it the other way you mentioned, definitely not wrong. I don't know what the correct or like the best practice way. Either way makes sense to me. But yeah, so definitely different ways to kind of organize your data. Again, I like having the central place, especially because I have this function that I always use. So my fetch requests are usually going to use that. So again, yeah, organizationally, I think this is a little cleaner, but totally up to you guys how you guys want to organize your API calls. Yep. Let's see. All right, so let's actually use our API here. So I imported it above. I'm going to do const data equals to do this API fetch. Why is it not picking that up? Fetch all task lists. Has me a little worried because I thought I exported it. All right, not sure why it's not VS Code's not picking up, but pretty sure it exists.
Is your import the API import?
I think that should be fine.
Dot instead of /.
Okay. Yes, because I'm in Pages. Thank you. So hopefully that finds it. Let's see if it actually finds it now. No, it still doesn't find it. Let's see. Make sure I am importing it correctly. So // Hey, no. Yep. There we go. Okay. Yeah, always good to find the right location, else it's not going to work. Now does VS Code find it? Fetch. There we go. Thank you guys. Didn't realize I had a bad import. So I need to go up 2 levels to get to the right directory. All right. So to do API fetch all task list, again, that's going to be an await. Very easy to forget writing your await keywords. If you don't write it, you will run into some errors guaranteed. But we want to wait for that to return some data. We want to make sure the data is not null, right? Because the way try catch fetch was implemented, if we get an error, data will be null. So always good to check before referencing data. Assuming data is non-null, we're just going to set task list to our data, and then we should be good to go. So I guess I need to align with my comments here. Get some data back. Update our state value. Hand raise. Is there another hand up there? Yeah.
No, sorry, I don't know how to put it down there.
Sorry, I heard some faint audio. I don't know if that was not for me.
It was just Matthew. He was he didn't mean to have his hand up.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. All right, let's see if that actually works. Again, hopefully all of our wires are set up so that our backend request actually gets us some data. The data should be what we expect, and we want to set the task list here. Let's give it a try. Again, I totally could have actually before we even do this. Or not before, but let's actually console log our data in case we don't get what we want. So console log data. Let's put that up here. Return.
Hey, Encore, where's set task list defined?
That is from our state function right here. So remember, useState returns our value and then a function that we must use to update that value. Otherwise, React is not going to be happy with us. I mean, it will work without that, but React won't update properly. Return data. We want to see what that is. Let's give this a run. I'm unsure if we have an error now. Well, that's not good. All right, let's make sure our navigation. So I'm in my pages folder. Let me go up 1 level, I think, not 2 levels. Oh, sorry.
You just need a refresh.
No, I put my API folder in the wrong location. That is my fault. I meant to put API in my source folder. That is my fault. Hopefully you guys didn't get thrown by that. But I want my API folder to be in my source folder because that's where all my code goes. So that's why I want to go up 1 level, not 2 levels. In fact, React complained when you write code outside the source directory. So that's what the error was. All right, URL is not defined. That is my bad. I bet I forgot a let statement, knowing myself. Yep, forgot a const or a let, so put that in there. All right, React is happy, but I am unhappy because there's nothing on my page. Let's take a look at our console, see what happens. All right, looks like I have a CORS issue here. So has been blocked by CORS policy. Is that actually true? Let's try without the slash. All right, getting some warnings here. Let's check your app, line 15. That was line 15. Does this need a slash? No, those are fine. Not sure what this error is about. It says type is invalid, expecting a string for built-in components. Did I do something wrong here? Elements. Well, that's right to me. Anyone have any ideas why this might be bad?
Because those components don't exist.
They
Maybe
do.
coming out those
Oh,
routes.
These two, you're right. You're right. Thank you. Thank you. You're right. Let me create some dummy components here. So this was task lists page. Thank you. Yeah, I totally blanked on that. So we need to create something for React to pretend that we're doing something. React functional component. This one is called task page. Thanks for catching that. It'll take me a while to figure that out. All right, let's see if those errors are cleaned up. Okay, so those errors are gone, but we got a 301. 301, do you guys remember what 301 stands for? Let's go with cats. So HTTP cats, what is 301? 301 moved permanently. So it looks like, I don't know, actually I'm surprised I get that response, but it looks like something is not where I'm looking for it. So I think something to do with slashes. So if I go to this manually, I should be able to access that. Yeah, so I could manually get there. So that page definitely exists, but it has an ending slash on it. So I need to make sure I have an ending slash. The slashes can cause a lot of trouble. I've had a lot of problem with, yeah. So there's no ending slash here. So that can cause some issues. So let's put that slash in there. Let's see if that changes this back. Refresh. All right, so I got a 200 back. So again, just to reiterate what's going on here, I'm getting a response back from fetch, but it's not what I expected. So actually, I'm not sure why that's a 200. Okay, anyway, issue here seems to be cores. So it looks like I can't get away from the cores issues. Go back to my backends and deal with those cores issues. So in my backend, I'm going to kill my server. I think I need to install pip. It's not pop. Pip install cores headers. Is that what it's called?
I think it's Django course headers.
Thank you. Django -cores dash headers. Nope. Oh, I need to be in my backend. All right, so cd into, I see, wrong folder. Backend, so I'm going to do pip install Django cores headers. I'm going to look this up. I'm pretty sure I'm messing up the import. So Django cores headers. Pip. All right, so this Django -cores dash header. Let's just copy this. All right, see if this works. I'm in my virtual environment. Try to load this. Okay, now it works. So I was in the wrong terminal before. I was on the front end side, so I was not in my virtual environment, but we should be good to go. So we did that. Let's just read documentation because that'll less likely throw me off. All right, so we did our pip install. Now we need to go to our installed apps and add cores headers. So I'm gonna copy that so I don't mistype it. Go to our settings file.
Hey, Ankur, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but can you explain cores headers to me? I'm not quite sure what that's doing.
So cores, again, I don't have a great explanation on it. It's a security thing. I think who was our presenter last week? Ronnie Flathers covered cores, just like why it exists. We need cores headers to specify who is allowed to actually make requests to this backend. So by default, the protection layer says no one by default has access to our backend. But I think we need to say, hey, our local host should have access to it because that's where we're making our requests from. So we just say like, white flag or like whitelist, sorry, some front end URL location so that they are allowed to make requests.
Got it. Thank you.
It is kind of annoying. I agree. I mean, but it's meant for your safety in terms of web developers, but it would be nice if I didn't have to do this. But all right, so what was I going? All right, so I added cores headers to my installed apps, just following their documentation. I need to add cores middleware above common middleware. So again, that positioning matters. So I'll put that there. All right, and then we have some options. We do allowed origins or allowed regex. This is a cores allow all origins. So I think this is the easiest. It's just a Boolean. You can set that equal to true. That means anyone can make a request that has access to your machine. But let's actually do cores allowed origins. So I'm gonna do this, copy and paste. I usually put it at the very bottom. I don't think the location matters too much. In this case, I want to only have one allowed origin. And that origin is going to be localhost. So I'm going to do HTTP //localhost 3000, because that's where my React server is running. And no slash. I believe when I put a slash, it's going to complain. Let's see if that's true. Run server. Yeah, so again, if you put a slash, it's a path. If you leave out the slash, it's an origin. I'm sure there's some rhyme or reason to that, but yeah, without the slash, everything's good. So with this change, the question is, will I still get cores issues? Hopefully not, but you never know with cores, So my backend is running up again with cores headers installed. Let's go back to our front end, which I think I took down. npm start. It's coming up, taking its time. All right, there we go. All right, that actually works. So we just had cores issues, but now we have the weekend to do and Brian's to-do list. Again, formatting, not the greatest. You guys can live with that. We're not going to do bootstrap because that is my last concern. Again, I like styling. I'm not trying to neglect that, but in the interest of time, probably won't add too much styling here. Where were we? We're on pages. Task list all page. So let's say div, probably add in an H2 saying all task lists, and then maybe an HR for good measure. All right, so we got about 45 minutes left. We might want to break in there, but let's see how far we can get here. So, all right, we got all of our task lists. Great. Let's do the same thing to get individual tasks, right? So if I click on this right now, empty page, because my task list page has not been implemented. So if I go to task list page, nothing here, hence we see nothing when we go here. Let's actually put something in here. So we'll say H2 task page. Let's call that an HR. So that's our title, and we're going to show some data here. So let's go H3 task list. And we want to have jumping ahead here. All right, so let's just have this. Does that render? Click on weekend to do. There we go. So we got our task list page, kind of showing something, but we don't want dummy data. We want real data. So let's do this a little quicker than we did the task list all page. It's going to be very similar. So similar enough where I'm going to actually copy my use effects because it's going to be, again, quite similar. Let me get some more real estate here. All right. So I'm just going to copy both my use effects and my states. So I'm going to copy that and go to my task list page, drop in my states and effects, and I have my render here. Need to still import some items. So import use states, use effects from React. All right, so we have our state. In this case, we have one single task list. I'm going to get rid. Looks like I mistyped it. Shame on me. That should be S again, just for naming sake. So task lists plural. Task list. All right. Task list, same thing going on, but instead of an array, we're just getting a single item. So in this case, the default value is going to be null. All right, use effects can be very similar. I'm just going to rename some things. So get task list. We're going to fetch a single task list. So call that fetch task list. Return data can say the same. Set task list can say the same. Comment's not good though. All right, so again, a lot of copy and pasting, but hopefully you guys understand. It's the same idea. We get to a component, we wait for it to load, and then we make an API call so that we get data and we'll show data in our render. Same thing going on, just we're hitting a different endpoint. So let's go to our API and create that fetch method. It's going to be pretty similar. So fetch a single task list. In this case, we need to go to a particular ID. So we're probably going to take in a task list ID, and we'll put that ID right here. So that's going to be string interpolation. All right. So again, nothing really changes. We still have a URL. We still a GET request. So we don't need to pass additional params. But with that, I think I've got my fetch requests all set in place. So fetch task list is what I called it. All right. So that took literally like 15 seconds. I just copy and pasted my API methods. Everything else should be fine. I need to import that API here. So API import to API. I wish VS Code would find it for me, but it did not. From .API / to the API. All right, so I've changed this function name, right? Because I'm fetching a task list. I need to pass in an ID. So that's going to be, that's not proper syntax, but I need some ID here. But same thing, we wait on it, get a response, update our internal data, and we'll get our data. We should be able to render our task list. So let's do render task list. All right, we still got to do some CRUDing. Again, this is a long project, but it is what it is. Render helpers. render task list. Okay, this will, main reason I create a function is so I can simply check if task list is null, return nothing. So I don't know how to do it for every single piece of data that I'm putting in there. Task list, if that is null, return null. All right, if it's not null, then we want to return some JSX. So return some nicely formatted JSX. So return a div. We'll have an H3 task list. Show the task list name. Would definitely be something there. We had a description, I believe. So let's definitely show description, maybe in the nice paragraph tag. We'll do description. Will be task list dot description. What else do we have on here? We had user. So if I want to show a username, so we'll do maybe let's go down to the H6 level. I don't think we use H6 enough. So we'll do owner will be task list dot. So we're going to get only an ID back here. That is an issue. Yes, we're only going to see the owner's ID. So this is where our serializer will come into play. So again, I might make some changes, but right now we only have our user ID. Right? I called it user because if you remember in my models, I think I called it user also. Let's double check. App models. So again, I called it user here. Maybe I want to call it owner or creator. Creator sounds better. Creator. So if I call it there, I will need to go to my task list page and do dot creator here. But I've made a change to my models. You guys remember, since my models changed, I need to make sure I update everything else. So this should be creator in my serializer, but more importantly, my migrations need to be ran. So let's do that again. Not the funnest thing, but something we gotta do. Take down my server if it will allow me to kill it. All right, Python manage.py. Make migrations. Hopefully I'll put that change up. Yes, I did. Cool. And then Python manage.py migrates. Easy peasy. Python manage.py run server. Hopefully I didn't miss any wires there. All right, server should be back up. I'll trust I didn't screw anything up there, but maybe I did. All right, so we're doing on our front end, we're showing the creator, the name, and description. I don't think we had anything else there. We don't need to show the ID to the user. So that'll be left off. All right. So cool. Rendering. I think that's all the things we need. We're making our fetch. We're getting data. Return data. Say task list. And I think we should get to go. I could have missed a step. Let's find out. So if we go here, ID is not defined. Yep, that makes sense. So question 4. Who's out there? Who's trying to hide from me? All right, someone with not with their camera on. Let's go with Lily Teeters. Are you there? Lily might not be there. Who else is out there? Let's go with Adam McDonald. Hello, sir. All right, it's Adam up there. So the thing without cameras, I don't know if you guys are actually there or just ducking. Who else? Who else? All right, I guess we're going with camera people. I guess you guys got away from me this time. Guillermo, how do you know how I can get an actual ID here? So I kind of like stubbed in an ID here. Do you remember how we actually get a valid ID to make that fetch request?
You get a valid ID. Are you
Like,
going
where
to
will
use
these
the
ID
params?
be coming from? What was that?
Params?
Yep, params is correct. So again, this is something coming from our router. So let's kind of backtrack, make sure we understand all the wiring here. So if I go back to my app.js, so we specify that we're going to allow us to capture a parameter. In this case, it's going to be called list ID because that's what I've named it. This is available from the URL. Well, how do we actually get it from the URL? Good question. That's where our router provides us functionality. So if I go here, I'm going to import something new called use params. Again, this is from our React router DOM. React router DOM. All right, use params. We want to capture that. So I usually call it router props. Const params is going to be use params. Takes in no arguments. Again, this is just something from the router. You call use params to return you an object that gives you access to all the things in your URL. In this case, I could do params dot list ID. Again, this name must match what I specified in my routing. So again, my routing has list ID as a parameter. Again, the colon, so that's going to be a parameter. So I get list ID, I can have access to it and get the list ID here.
Ankur, use params is kind of treating like the URL, like almost like a dictionary where it's breaking it apart.
Yeah,
with a translator of like a key value based on your router.
Yeah, I think that is correct. Yeah, so we get an object back, and that's going to have all the variables. So in this case, we only have one. But if we looked ahead to, this route, you can have multiple params in there. You can have list ID, task ID. You have multiple items in there. You can even have like some query parameters also. I think there's some way to access those, but we don't usually deal with those. But yeah, so we should have access to this. Hopefully that's working correctly. So let's refresh here. Not good. Refresh. All right, task page, get an error. It does not like my fetch task list. So it looks like there's something.
Yeah, Ankur, your new API that you created, it needs to be singular. And to do API.js.
Thank you. Yep. Very, very correct. Yes, sorry. So thanks for catching that. So fetch task list singular. So the naming issue. Let's see if that cleans up my errors. Thank you, Tanya. Fetch. Oh, I'm exporting it also, but with the plural. Yep. We want singular naming. All right, let's try that. There we go. Hey, this looks familiar, right? I got task list, weekend to do, owner 2. That's not really informational, but we'll clean that up. Description stuff I need to complete this weekend. Let's go to another task list. So if I go back, let's check out Brian's to-do list. All right, that's cool. But we also have additional data, so keep that in mind. So right now we don't have to make any changes on our backend. If you remember kind of how Django works for us, if I go to my models, remember that we have this foreign key, right? So there's a foreign key in my task model that I could, from the reverse side, I could reference as tasks. So effectively, my task list kind of has an imaginary field called tasks that I have access to. There's nothing I need to add. Django has already done this for me. But there's a change I need to make. My serializers, notice I'm not passing tasks along with it. So that's where I want to add in tasks. So now that task data will be passed. Again, this is data that exists in my model or through my model, but now I actually want to pass it to my front end. So let's actually see that. Go back to my front end and I'm hopping around projects. So here we have access to, let's say UL. And we're going to render tasks. I'm going to create a new function. Call it render tasks. Tasks, maybe. All right, so this is going to be some data that's passed to me. I want to make sure task list is legit. Or let's actually pass it something. So task list.tasks. And then we'll take in tasks here. And then we'll return tasks.map. Again, map, very handy function. Each task will give us something. So yeah, this can only be foreign keys right now. We're only getting foreign keys from our server. So let's only show the IDs right now. Nothing too interesting. Return some list items with the task.id. Or it's just called task, I think. Yeah, these are just going to be IDs, so task is what I'm going to return. Okay, let's see how that looks. Or if I crash this, I do. Undefined reading map, that's because this doesn't exist. Let me try going back. My homepage. All right, let's click on Brian's to-dos. All right, that worked, but I don't have anything here. All right, so how do I get that? So I call render tasks. Render tasks should return me list items. So let's do a console log. I think we're probably due for a break again, but let's get this working. So I just want to make sure I actually have some tasks. Again, the question is my serializer actually passing me back something in tasks? So if I refresh. All right, so this is Brian's to-do list. I believe he only has one task. Let's actually go back to my task list because I probably have a few more. There we go. So notice we get an array with 1, 2, 3. Those are the task IDs that I get back. For some reason, I'm not rendering them. So let's try to fix that. So have an unordered list, render tasks. Render tasks should return that. What am I missing here? Oh, return statement because I have curly braces. Not bad. There we go. So these are my tasks for my task list. Right? Again,
Hey, Encore, what's the reason that you have to use the return statement for this? Because like the typical syntax is that you don't have to use a return statement.
yes, I'm glad you asked. So the reason I need to in my particular case is because I chose to add curly braces part of my anonymous function. If you have a single line return statement for an anonymous function, the clean way to do it is get rid of the curly braces, omit the return statement, and just have the fat arrow pointing to your line of code. So this is valid syntax. In fact, I can clean this up without putting parentheses around there. So this is like a minimal fat arrow function where if you have one parameter, you don't need those parentheses. If you only have one expression in your I guess your body of your anonymous function, you don't need a curly braces and a return. So yep, this will work as well. I usually like curly braces. I don't know why. Maybe I like typing extra code, but it works the same. Again, you might see this error where you get a warning. Each unique each item in a list should have a key property. We talked about this before. Again, so something React wants. You don't have to pay attention to it, but usually React is warning you for a reason, so we can clean that up pretty easily if I can find my list items. So key is what it's looking for. We'll just pass it to index. So index is coming in here. So again, this is what the map function does. It passes you your item and your index as your second parameter. So it's not like magic. It's something with the map function. So key at index, and we probably need one for our keys right here. In this case, I think I need index. That should work. Oh, I need those parentheses back. All right, cool. The warnings are gone. We're seeing these IDs. All right, so let's take a, do you guys want to break now? Yeah, I think we're due for a break. So when we get back from break, the question is, how do we replace these numbers with actual data? That's what our serializers in the back end need to be modified. So we not are just sending, foreign key or primary keys. We want to send actual, more relevant data in our serializers. So we'll see that after break. You guys can kind of think about that. So let's take a good 10-minute break. We're running short on time, I guess, as expected, underestimated the time this would take. But let's get this working. Let's do some CRUDing after our break and make sure we can, create some to-do lists or, update, delete some tasks. And then we'll see some CRUD functionality here. So let's take a quick break and we'll be back at 11:45. Yeah, so we haven't been really using props much. It's because I've not really created any subcomponents, but that's probably something we could do. So one example would be in my task list page. Notice where I am kind of showing this stuff. Like this could be thrown into a different component, for example. It doesn't have to be. Again, a lot of it comes down to organizational sake. But I think per that suggestion, let's actually create a component just to see some props at work. So I'm going to create a new folder, call it components. And then this component will just be called tasklist.js to distinguish it from task list pages. It's going to be a functional component called task list. Again, this is just kind of, have some more nested or separated functionality. I think it's a good suggestion because,
Also, what was that shortcut you just used to create the entire thing?
Yeah, I created a snippet. So that's a VS Code functionality. Happy to show that to you guys at some other point. Snippets are kind of handy. Again, if you're writing the same thing over and over again, probably should create a snippet. Like I should create a try catch fetch snippet, which allows you just to create like a command that will auto insert some code for you. So yeah, if you're doing something often enough, VS Code probably will make your development quicker with VS Code snippets. So you guys can Google that, figure out how to do that, or happy to go over it in a breakout session at some point. Okay, so my goal here is just to break out this functionality and put that into task list.js. Again, I don't have to, it works without it, but organizationally, probably nice to have this component. So I have a task list component that's simply going to render a task list. But the question is, how do we actually get a task list to this component? And we'll talk about that in one moment, but let's get our task list page happy with imports. We want to import task list from components.tasklist. All right. So now instead of returning this, we could simply return a task lists item. All right, and this could actually make my life a little, or my code a little simpler. I could do task list and task list. So that's a one-liner. It's so short now, I could actually just do this right here. So let's actually do that since we clean up the code. We could just render this inline right here. Actually, don't need a return statement though. All right, so that gets rid of this. Oh, we still need to render test, so that should move. All right, so we're just refactoring some code to just see better organization. Also talk about props, because we've not talked about props yet. So what are props? Jason, do you have a high level explanation for what props are in your own words?
I guess it's generally a way to pass down components from like, I want to say like higher level JavaScript files. I don't really know how else to describe it.
Yeah, I think you have the general idea. Yeah, so we want to pass down data from a parent component down to a child component. Yep, so it's the way we pass information around from top level to lower level. So in this case, task list can take in any prop we want to create. So in this case, we could call it task list as a prop. And then we could pass it task list. Now, how is this all working? Well, we have a state value called task list. We're choosing to pass it down with the name of task list. Again, these names do not need to match. This is just a parameter right here that I've highlighted. This is our state value that we're passing down. Usually I have the names match because why change up naming, but they don't have to match. So in this case, we're passing down the state value down to task list as a prop. So now if I go to task list components, I should have access to task list via props. So props is being taken in to our functional component. Now we have props accessible here. So I should be able to do all this, and I need to get back my render function. Hopefully I still have it. Yes, I still have it. All right, so render test, I still need to call that. Okay, cool. So now nothing should have changed like visually, but now we kind of nested away some functionality. Hopefully I got my imports. Nope. Oh, it is. I don't know what happened there. All right, but with all that refreshing, stuff is working as it did before. All right, so again, state values are internal values for components. Prop values are something that's passed down from parent components down to a child component. So that is fundamental React terminology. So you guys should hopefully be good with that, those concepts there. All right, so we create our task list components just to use that within our task list page. Again, that makes our task list page much simpler, right? We can render it like so. What else do we want to do here? So again, we're not going to hit every single endpoint, but we want to do some CRUDing here. So first thing I want to do is not show numbers here, right? I don't want to show owner 2. I don't want to see, task 1, 2, and 3. That means nothing to the user. So let's actually get this working. So this is where we need to go back to our backend and update our serializers to show the appropriate data we want to send. All right, so let's go back to our backend, take a break from React for a little bit. Let's go to our app serializers. So again, what's going on here? Well, this creator is simply a foreign key, right? So creator is a foreign key to our user model. By default, it's just going to use the ID when it sends the data. It knows the ID because that's what the foreign key is referencing. Same thing with our priority and also our list. But we haven't talked about task yet, so let's just focus on task list. So foreign key, that's giving us a creator, and also this reverse lookup of tasks is giving us foreign keys for various task models that exist. So how do we actually show relevant user data to the user? Well, that's where serializers, I think, again, come into play. So here we could do something like tasks. One simple way is to use string related field. This is a read only field, meaning we can only send data we can't accept data with this field. So if I do what I want, tasks equals, so again, this field is going to equal, let's actually put it below. Right, so we specify what fields we want. We're going to specify how to get this particular field. We're going to do string related field, import that from Serializers. So string related field. I think that's all we had to do. So string related field, and then we need to tell it, we need to pass it, I'm blanking on this. Let's go with string related field, drf. All right, serializer relations, look for string related fields, should be here. All right, so string related field, we need to pass it many, yes, because we have many, but otherwise everything else should be good. So let's pass it many equals true, right? Because we have multiple tasks for a task list. So many equals true. All right, so our serializer changed. We didn't change our model at all, so we don't need to do any migrations. Our server should refresh, which it did. Let's see if that changes what our data looks like. So let's go back to our front end. React break is over. We want to go back to components. Where's that? Here. All right, so right now we are simply showing the task here, but we want to show the description, but I think we should go with the string related field. So let's refresh, let's see if that works. All right, notice now this says vacuum by Xmas presence and laundry. I didn't change anything on my front end because the data I'm getting back in tasks now is the string values for those objects, not the ID values. So just kind of connecting the dots a little bit more. Keep in mind, my task model has an str method. That is what string related field is using now. Instead of using the ID here, right? There's an ID field for every model. Instead of using the ID by default, we said, hey, use our string method to get the value. So our serializer is saying, okay, I'm going to transmit data for tasks, but instead of using IDs, I'm going to use the str methods for each of those tasks that exist. So that's why we get string values sent to our front end. Now, this isn't necessarily going to be sufficient because what if I want to click on these, task items and actually dig into them? Well, I need the ID for these, which I'm not getting right now. All I'm getting is right now the string ID, the string value, sorry. So instead of doing string related field, we could get a little more advanced and do task serializer. But we got to switch the order of this. So swap those. All right, now we're going to transmit the entire data that's returned from task serializer. We're going to get ID, name, list, due date, and priority. So if I do this, now this is not going to work. I'm going to get an error. I got a server error. That's even worse. So what do I do here? Tasks equals many equals true. That's what I want to do. True. Okay, so I changed this to many equals true, but task serializer. So I'm using this serializer to get the field values here. But my front end now needs to change because task list, now this task item here, it's an actual object. If we take a look at our data here, where is it? So this is what we're getting back now from the server. We're actually getting an object with an ID, name, list, due date, and priority. Why is that happening? Well, because we told our backend, keep switching between files. We told our backend to actually get that data, supply all of these fields for each task. So that's what we're actually sending for each task in our tasks collection or task array. So now that we're getting this object back, we can't simply just show an object. So that's the error here. We can't just render an object. So we need to actually dig down into that object and show like the ID or the name or the list, whatever we want to show here. So if I go back to my front end code, simple change, nothing too fancy. Task list, instead of showing just the task, I do task.name because that is a field in that object. So if I see that, hopefully React should be fine. Yep, there we go. We're back to vacuum by Xmas presence and do laundry. But now we could, do some additional things. So let's jazz this up a little bit. I'm gonna get rid of the single one line if, just because I need more stuff. Any questions pop up as I'm kind of babbling here? So I'm gonna create a link here, just like we did earlier with our task list. I'm gonna do this for each of my tasks. So I'm gonna do a link tag. Let's run my lists. Let's put that outside of my list elements. All right, so I want to do some cruding. So as expected, it's taking longer than I thought. All right, so link to somewhere. So I'm going to link to, where do you want to link to? Well, we want to go to task list slash let's get it backslash or backtick $. So we get the task list off the task itself. So we have lists. I think that's a field that we created. Let's take a look. So list is that field that we're targeting there. This is gonna be a foreign key ID. We're gonna do slash strings. What's going on here? Curly braces is what I'm missing. All right, I lost track here. All right, so this is getting unloaded. All right, so link to task list slash task slash $task.id. Why am I going to this route? Well, that's the route I decided to create for my front end, right? I'm doing task list, find the list ID slash task, and then the task ID. So that's the route I want to go to from this link. So I'm creating a link tag again to use with my router. Where do I want to go to? Well, I want to go to task list, task ID, sorry, list ID slash task, and then the task ID. Curly brace, and I think I should be good to go. So let's take a look. Nope. Link tag, of course, we need to import it. Tab magic. Import link from down. All right. Task page, nothing on it. Link is not defined.
You have an extra bracket on line 9. Line 12, sorry.
12.
Towards the end.
There. Thank you. All right, cool, thanks. Now we have links, right? So these should take us to a task page, which doesn't have anything on it. So I click on it. Cool, nothing here because my task list page doesn't exist. Task page, task page, task page. All right, nothing here. We could say, task page. And okay, we didn't get to crudding, but crudding is important. So let's try to do at least a little bit of crudding before lunch. So here, task page, just show me a task page. There you go, task page. Let's do some crudding. So let's create tasks. That's usually a common one we want to do for a to-do list. So let's create first, and we'll do an update and then delete. Should not take too long, I don't think. But I say that without even actually knowing it. So let's create a few more pages here. So I'm going to create and modify. What is this? Modify task page.js, and then I also want, so that's going to handle my create, update, delete. I don't need any page for that. It's going to automatically do that. So modify task page, if I called it, let's create a functional component for that. Modify task page. It's going to have a form on it. That's how we usually get user input, is via a form. I'm just going to use a plain old HTML form instead of a bootstrap form. But we have our form. The on submit is going to be some logic we create. So it's a handle form submit. And then what we want to do here, we need some inputs. So let's start creating those. Do label. This is a task. So we need a name. Select, is that what it is? I'm gonna look that up because I don't do that often enough, but we want an input for a name. All right, what else we have? We had I forget what our model has. Too much to think about. Our models for our tasks. So we have a priority, we have a due date, we have a list. Okay, so list can be select, due dates can be just a simple text field. Get more elaborate with date pickers, but not going to bother. So modify task page. Let's get a couple more items in here. So label, say task lists. It's going to be a select. So you guys remember how selects work? I do not. HTML select elements, documentation, name of the game, select tag. All right, so we create some options. So let's go with that. So options, what options are we gonna have? So this is gonna be dynamically generated based on all of our task lists. So we need to get all of our task lists here. So that's gonna be more fun. Let's create some state values. So states, cap states. All right, so we're gonna have const task potentially. So task. So if we're updating, we're gonna have initial task, I believe. So that's gonna be equal to use state. It's gonna be null. We might also have a const. You know what if we don't give them the option to select a task list? We're gonna fix that to the task list that they're a part of right now. That makes sense to me. Let's go with this. All right, so we want a handler here. So handlers, this will be const handle form submits. We want to do something when that happens. So we get events by default. We want to prevent default, meaning we don't want to refresh the page or anything. We'll handle all the behavior. So prevent default, as in we'll avoid doing whatever happens by default. All right, so we get an event object. We want to use that event object to create our own object here. So we'll say data equals name event.target.element 0, because that is the first element we have in our form. Dot value targets. What else do we have? We're going to have, so we're going to hard code our, or sort of hard code our task list. I think we just call it list. This is going to be equal to from our params, right? Our params should have our task list in it. So let's actually just set up our routes since we can do that. If I'm bouncing all over the place now. So we're going to create a new route. Let's say this new route is going to be task list, list ID, task / create. It's going to be the modify task. Yeah, modify task page. So if I go to some task list ID and go to task / create, that should take me to the modify task page. That's going to be, need to be imported. So import modify task page. All right, so the reason I wanted to create that route was so that I know I have list ID available. So we're going to still extract that list ID from the params, because again, that's a design choice I made to hard code this into when they're creating tasks. So do use params from React router DOM. We get params router props const params equals use params, and I want all that so I could do params dot list ID. All right, so list ID will be there. What else do we have? We had due dates. So due dates. This is going to be event target dot elements, second elements dot value. I'm typing way too quickly here. Sorry for mistakes. Elements. All right, so due date will be another field we need to create down here. It's going to be another input. Again, date picker will be better. I don't think there's a default date picker for HTML. So we'll do due dates, and then we also have priority. This will be our select placeholder. All right, so this is going to be our select object. Select there. And then we need to put some option elements in between. So we had option, syntax for that, value equals back burner. Back burner would be that one. All right, put more of these. So as I'm typing this, you could kind of request this data from the server, as in we have a model that has the priority. So probably a little better, so we don't get out of sync. Like if we had a 6 priority, we shouldn't have to update the front end like the way we're doing right now. We could request the model, the priority model from the back end and get all the values from it. So again, that's probably the slightly better way to do it, but not what I'm doing right now. So back burner, we also had low. We had medium. We had high and critical. A lot of typing here. Medium, high, and critical. Okay, so that's going to be our select. That should give us a value back. What else do we have? We had priority. We got some priorities one wanted. Priority. I think we just get the value the same way. Elements 2 value. All right. So we're populating our data. Then we want to make an API call. So we need to create our API method here.
You got a period on line 20 there that you're gonna have to get rid of.
Thank you. API, where did that go? So here we need to create another method, but this is where we actually we're going to make use of this params opt that we're not passing right now. So for our fetch, we're going to create a add task. Add task. It's going to not take in an ID, but it's going to take in a task object. All right, so where are we going to send this request? Again, probably got lost in all on the whole shuffle, but if we take a look at our routing and our backends, where are you? Let's go here. So we are looking at individual tasks. So if I go to task 4, which we're at, we need to put, no, we want to create. So we want to create to API/task. So our task. So this is not our task list. This is naming is getting confusing. This is a list of all of our tasks. So we should be able to do a post request here. Right, so we can post here. So we're going to send it to API/task is our path here. So want to go to task, what I call it, task and no ID. Right, so we're going to create a const params object. We need to specify the method. So the method for this is going to be a post. Post, we need headers. So a header, specify the content type. So it's type, I think it's going to be application lowercase /JSON. Then more importantly, we need the body of this message. And that's going to be, and we want to convert it to JSON. So that's what JSON stringify does. Take in our task object, make it into a JSON format so we could transmit it to our server. That's our params object. We want to pass that to try catch fetch, which will pass it along in the fetch request. But again, method, header, I'm not sure if that's required in this case, but body is required because that's what we're actually sending to our server. Hopefully everything goes right. We should get back a response with our data. So we could have tested with Postman, but we've not introduced Postman yet. So we're posting to base URL/task. So that's API/task. All right, so let's export this. Add task. Now in our manage modify task page, we should be to import our API functions. So that's via import to do API from API / to API. All right, so here we can make a fetch request. So let's make this async so that we can await on it. Const data equals to do API. We want to call add task. I'm going to pass it this data object that we created. So let's call that something else. Let's call this task obj. Task obj will pass back in here. All right, so we're passing in this object. It's going to be stringified, converted to JSON, sent to the server. Server's going to respond eventually. So we want to await that response. And then assuming we get data, we'll assume it's created so we could use our navigate tag. So this is a question that Guillermo had probably like 7 hours ago. It's been coding for a while, but we're going to import navigate from React Router DOM. I guess I could have done that up here. So let's just do that all in one statement.
What's the difference between navigate and use navigate Encore?
Use navigate is the functional way to do it. Navigate is a component. So if you use navigate, you're making a function call. Navigate is a component you could render that does the same thing. So
Amazing.
here,
Thank you.
I guess in this case, I want to use the use navigate. So if I were rendering, for example, if I put a navigate element in here, that would actually navigate to somewhere else. But in this case, use navigate is what I want to use. Thanks for mentioning that. So I'm not rendering a component, I'm calling a function. So use navigate. So do const navigate equals use navigate. Because we want to navigate, sorry, navigate. All right, so now that we have that, assuming we get a valid response, we're going to navigate elsewhere, probably back to the original task list to see that there. Navigate to, where do we want to go to? /task list / where do we get our task list ID from? It's params.list ID. $. Okay. All right, so assuming everything goes correctly, we should be taken back to our task list with the new task kind of shown there. So let's see what we missed over here. I'm sure, again, there are a lot of pieces we've added. I'm sure we messed up something, but let's try our best to see what we're doing. So let's go back to our task list page. Where did that go? Let's create a button.
The object on line 19.
Line 19. Oh, yep. Thank you. Make that mistake often. All right, so let's go to our task list page. Let's add a button so that we could actually add some items here. So we add it between here. Button that should navigate us somewhere. So let's say add task. It's going to be a link. And we import link before here. That we did. So we didn't. So we want link in here. All right. So this is not being used. All right. So we're adding a button link. Where's that going to take us to? Well, it's going to take us to our new route. Our new route was /task list. I've said that 100 times already. $. We want to go to this task list, so we should have an ID. But if that is null, it's going to be a problem. Link to task list.id /task/create. I think is my route I created. Hopefully I remember that correctly. So when you click on that button, it should be taken to that page. Let's see if this works. I bet it won't. All right, let's go back to our home page. Okay, we got 2 to-do lists. Let's make that a little larger. Weekend to do. All right, so notice we have our add task button. What if I click on that? Okay, so this is my form. It looks horrible. Can't live with that right now, so I need to clean that up. We need some break lines. So let's break this line. Or PRs, break rule, is that what it's called? One more here. And one more. Oh, we only have a submit button. That's probably necessary. So button type equals submit. So again, you need this for a form. Otherwise, you can't submit your form in any manner. So button add task in caps. So submit, add task, PR just in case. Okay, let's see how that looks. Hopefully more. That's still not aligned well, but we'll live with that. So let's add a H2, add task page. HR slash. All right. So we'll have to live with this form, but all right, name. It's giving you a task. What do I need to do this weekend? I don't know. I need to unpack. Task due date. Let's freeform this. It's going to be 2/21/12, and what is this? I think 18th. So 16th is this weekend. I don't even know. 18th is a Saturday. All right. What priority? Well, I don't really care if I don't do this. I'll put it at low. Let's try adding a task. Fingers crossed. Hopefully this doesn't blow up on me. Okay, I clicked add task. Nothing seemed to happen. Let's. Oh, looks like something. So it puts some stuff into my URL that makes me think we're not preventing default properly. Called prevent default. Oh, lowercase p, I bet. Let's do that again. So,
Hey, so Ankur, what does default do? What exactly are you preventing?
yeah, so when you submit a form, by default, it's going to refresh your page. And so, like, if you notice my URL, it like put the params into my URL. So this is default HTML form behavior. So I just want to avoid that because I want to do something different. I don't want to refresh my page because A, that's going to reset my React app. Two, I don't want to stick some params in the URL here. So I'm just avoiding default form behavior and just doing something else by making an API call instead. So I think prevent default lowercase p was my issue. Let's find out. Task due date 2/21/12/18. Low priority. Okay, we got an error. That's fine. Cannot read defined reading 0. That's not good. So handle form submits. What does my event object look like? I know we're going to lunchtime, so I need to wrap up soon, but we have stuff to do also. So console log that. Gonna add again. All right, so this is what my event looks like. I have a target. This is a form. I do have index 0, so I'm not sure why that's complaining. There should be a value in there. Unpack. That's what I wanted. So can I read properties up undefined, reading 0? So it looks like event. I'm a little lost here. So event.target.element does exist.
That array is part of target, not sub element array. I think you need to do target parent bracket 0.
Oh, okay.
For some reason, that doesn't seem normal, but that's what it's asking you to do.
Yeah, let's try that. Now it still complains on that level. So let's see. So we have our events.
Hey, Ankur,
target.
Quick question.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Can you use, instead of element and the index number, can you use the name of the input field?
I'm pretty sure there is a way to do that, but I spotted my error. So let's do elements. So again, element doesn't exist, elements does. Yeah, so if I give my field's name, so in this case, I should probably say due date and priority. Yeah, there should be a way to extract these by name. If we try to investigate that object that we just printed out. So let's try it. Okay, let's try this one more time. All right, let's take a look at these. All right, so the question is, can we actually do it by ID? So notice we have target, we have 0, doesn't have a name in it. Let's see. The answer is yes.
What if you just index on the target? Instead of the element? So if you go, like, it's just target then 0, and you index on that?
Yeah, but you're still using indices. The question, can you just like target dot name, target dot due date, just to get the
Oh, yeah,
values?
you can do it that way too.
Yeah, I'm not sure, so I'm not gonna. There's a way to do it. I will say that much, but the way I know how right now is using elements. So let's just go with that if you guys are cool with that. All right. So are we getting errors still? Probably. Unsupported media type. That is new to me. 415. How are we sending our data? It's probably something wrong with that. Where's API? API, sending files here, that can go away. All right, so make sure we're doing stuff right here. So we are stringifying. That seems like what we need to do here. Application JSON. This looks correct for me. I don't know if I'm missing anything here. Unsupported media type, API test. Anyone have any ideas? So
The header, maybe? Is there a lowercase or uppercase problem with the header? I'm not sure. I'm just guessing.
with the header, so this.
No, the header section. Like, is it application uppercase A or lowercase a, or is it content type of the? You know, I'm just guessing. I don't know.
That's a good thought since it says unsupported media type. So application slash JSON. Yeah, it's probably something with my headers. So header request type. Content type application JSON. I think. Do I have any typo here? Content type headers. Is that what I need? Headers. I think I need headers. All right, so bad request, we change that. So am I going to the wrong location? To do, so where are we going? We're going to base URL slash test. Is that where we want to go? So base URL is API. I want to go to test, right? It's a good location. We are posting, we're sending a due date list. Yeah, I don't know. So I might kind of take this offline because you guys are probably starting for lunch.
Could it be the formatting for the date?
Could be. I feel like the format I sent is the same format. So that should be kosher. Let's actually print out the object we're sending just to verify that. So if I go back to my modify task page, let's print out this task object before we send it. OBJ. All right, let's take a look at that. Send it one more time. All right, so we have name, lists, priority. Yeah, it looks fine to me. Oh, priority might need to be a ID, but again, I don't think that's why we're getting a media type issue. So let me change that quickly. These need to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't think that was a core issue though. Oh, that actually works. All right. So summary, I need to send numbers back because we're only dealing with primary keys for the priority, right? We can't send a text value because our serializer in the backend is expecting an ID. So if I go to, where was it? Serializers, again, this priority right now, by default, it's going to be a primary key. So we need to pass it an ID. We're not doing anything like this. Again, we could specify we want to send text instead of an ID. That could be another issue. But in this case, I want to send the value, the ID value. So with that, let's add one more task. Let's say go to lunch. Due date is now, but let's just say 2/21. What's today's date? 12/13. This is a critical issue, so let's add a task. There we go. So we have go to lunch added to us. Again, a lot going on here. I think we're due for a break. So I'm going to give you guys the option, or maybe just make it optional, if that makes sense. Let's take a full lunch. Let's go until 1:30. If you guys want to continue this, let's take a quick class vote here. So let me pause here. All right, so we kind of left off again. We had the ability to add tasks. So we had, make dinner as a task, maybe due dates tonight also. That's probably a medium priority. We could skip dinner, but notice we could add tasks currently. So the things we wanted to add on here was delete, update and delete functionality. So how do we do that? Well, one, we need our task page. So if I go to click make dinner, notice we have nothing implemented on our task page component. So let's quickly render that up. So I'm going to create a new component called task, just like we did for our task list. Again, this is optional. You can do everything without this nested component, but good to have some organization. So I'm going to copy some code here. All right, so we're going to show some task data here. So not task list. I want to show what task list it is a part of. So this is going to be task.list, task.name. We don't need to show every item, but we do have a priority. That's probably good to see. Priority. And let's just keep it there. I guess we had due date too. Sorry. One last thing, due dates. All right, so we're gonna probably need to make some changes on our serializers because I know this I'm going to show exactly what we want to, but we can tackle that as needed. So due dates. Okay, curly brace. All right, so assuming we have props.task passed down, we should show something, but if we don't, we probably want to render task. All right, coding quickly, I know, but stop me whenever you need to. So if not props.task, return null, else return this good stuff. All right, returning JSX, need to put that in parentheses and also need a parent div. Otherwise, you get these red squigglies. Because again, you can only return one top level element. In this case, divs are good enough. All right, so we have our div. Now we just need to call render task. All right, so create this component so that we can simply go to our task page, import that here. So import was it task from components / task. All right, and then eventually we're going to want to render a task here. So we're going to do the same thing we did before, where we check if we have task and task, a lot of tasks. So what's going on here? Well, we're going to create a state value called task. We're going to do the same thing we did before, where we have a state value. We want to populate with data. The way we're going to get that data is make an API call to our backend. So it's going to be the same structure as before, where we have a use effect, which is going to make that API call for us. So task. So we need a state value, as we mentioned. So state would be const task, set task. Const, type of use states. Null would be my initial state value. We need an effect, so effects. We also need some router props because we want to get that param. So const param equals use params. Again, we want to get the task ID so we could fetch the task from our backend. So use params we're going to use. And we just need to import a bunch of stuff. So we need to use states, use effects from React. And then we also want to use params. Get familiar with all these items because you're probably using them in your own projects. So this from React router DOM. All right, so we got all that stuff imported. Params, use state, effects we want. So then use effect, our good old friend. It's going to be an anonymous function. Dependency list is going to be empty for now. We can make this params dot task ID. Again, again, this is when our use effect will kind of fire off. So again, as I mentioned, use effect, the way I guess simplify it is something needs to be done after something else happens. In this case, the answer to that question is when is this use effect going to fire? That is anytime params.task ID changes, we're going to do the logic in here. That's the whole point of the dependency array. Without it, just review. Empty dependency array means do this exactly one time when this component gets rendered for the first time. That's the only time this use effect will fire if you have an empty dependency array, which is different than if you omit the dependency array. Now this use effect is saying fire off anytime anything changes, a prop value, a state value, anything that changes, just do this use effect. That's usually not going to be what you want to do. Like that's going to be pretty excessive unless there's a reason you need to keep doing something. Otherwise, you almost always want a dependency array. In this case, params that task ID will tell me when I need to get my new task data. So if I get a new task ID, I need a new task object from my backend. All right, so we're going to do the same thing as before. Const get task. It's going to be our async function because our use effect cannot be async. So we'll do const data equals, looks like we need to import something else. Import to do API from API slash to. All right, so to do API should have a get task method where we pass it the params.task ID. We need to await it. Again, always easy to forget that await, but it will give you bad problems if you don't wait for that data. So when we get data, we want to set task from that data. All right, so again, the structure should look similar to exactly what we did with task list. We're just doing it for a task instead of task list. So if we go to my API, let's get this running. So fetch task list. Now I want to do fetch, put it up here. Fetch task. Our URL on our backend is task for that. We pass it an ID. That should give us back our task list. Or sorry, our task, not task list. All right, so fetch task is what we created here. Again, just a different URL, otherwise same thing as before. All right, so given that task page, we get a task, we await the response. Once we get the data, assuming it's not null, that likely means we got what we wanted. So we set task there. Then we pass simply make sure task is not null, and then we render a task component. All a task component is doing is taking in a task object via props and showing us that data. All right, let's see if this works or if I screwed something up. Render task, not a function. That's probably because I forgot my const. Param not defined. On task page, probably because I need an S on it. Param, this is what I call it up here. Cool. All right, so let's
To
go back to
call the function, right?
Pardon?
You have to call the function inside the use state.
Yes, thank you. That's why I saw nothing there. I was wondering why I saw nothing there. Thank you, Seth. Where's that task page? Yep, you're right. So we created a function in our use effect, but yep, Seth is totally correct. We actually want to call that function from our use effects. So get task. So that's actually going to retrieve that task for us. So let's see if this works. All right, so weekend to do, our list is getting longer. A bunch of stuff to do. Let's go to launch. All right, we got an error because get task is probably not, I call it fetch task, not get task. Fetch task is what I called it. There we go. So we got go to launch, we got the details for it. And the priority we're not sending. Why are we not sending that? Well, let's take a look at our serializers on our backend. So serializers priority. So I am sending that. Did I mistype it somewhere? Task page. Priority description. That's not right. Priority. All right, do we see the priority there? There we go, priority 5. Obviously, we would want to see some text there, so we could simply change this, right? On task list 1, again, that's not something we necessarily want to see. So easiest way to fix this would be go to our serializers. Again, same thing we did, similar to what we did here. We could do for our tasks, we could do task equal list equals string related field. This is singular, so there's not many. We also got the same thing for priority. String related fields. Did I put a str method on my priority? I think I did. Let's see, models. Yep, I have a self.level. So let's see if that fixes it. If not, we could do something else. Refresh. Okay, something broke. I think it's because of a fake import. Yes. Will this work? There we go. So now we got the text here. Again, IDs aren't really useful to users. They want to see actual text. So now I know that go to lunch is part of my weekend to-do list. Priority is back burner, so very low priority. I have a due date. Great. All right, so this wasn't our update delete, but now we could add some update delete functionality to our task page. So task page, let's add it to the section here, HR. Okay, let's add some buttons. Button, it should probably be surrounded by a link that I will need to import. Yes. Import our link object from React Router DOM. Add some links here. So it's going to be one button to update and one button to delete this particular task. So let's say update task, and then also a delete task. All right, so I'm going to actually reuse that modify task page that I created. So I wanted to use that for add and update. So we'll call this delete task. All right, so where are we going to go to for this? For this, we want to go to, I don't think we can find this route, so let's create it here. We're going to go to task list slash it's conditional. Assuming we have a valid task, we want to go to that task.list ID. Oh, that's going to be a string now, isn't it? That's an issue. Well, all right, we're gonna figure that out. Task slash task.id. All right, the question is, how do I get the task list ID now that I'm sending the string version instead of the ID version? Well, easiest solution I know right now is use a serializer for that. So that gets a little tricky because if I put this up here, it's going to complain it's not defined because it's defined lower. So I got kind of like a sort of a circular dependency here. That's not going to be good. What if I create another serializer? Again, nothing stopping us from creating multiple serializer. Task list summary serializer. Right, we can send the same data in many different ways. So this will kind of just send only the task list ID and name. I don't care about the nested task because I'm referencing it from here. So if I copy the list good stuff, and I just want to send the ID and name. I don't care about anything else about the task list for my purpose here. So now I would reference task list summary serializer. Note the different name. So again, this list is using this serializer versus my normal task list is serialized via task list serializer. All right, so summary serializer is just going to send the ID and name. So that allows me to serialize it there. And because now I'm sending an ID and name field, I do need to change my front end. So that would be on my task page. I don't want to show just task list. I need to do task list.name. So I'm sending the name and ID as part of that object. Okay, so with that change, let's make sure I didn't break anything. That looks gross. Okay, I've definitely screwed up something there. So did I leave something incomplete? task page. Did I complete that? That looks fine. Let's try to do this. Something I missed here, but we want to delete task. Oh, we don't have routes, so maybe that's an issue. So let's create some routes here. I wonder if I'm gonna finish this. 14 minutes left. I could do it. List ID, task ID / update. That should go to the modify task page. Modify task page. So it's going to use the same thing as the add route, but we need to do something a little different. That might get a little tricky. In this case, let's create another. All right, so routing, hopefully that clears up the error I was doing before. Task list page. Task list page. All right, so we want to go to /update /delete. So my delete page, I probably don't need it. I just need to call one function. So I'm trying to think how I can maybe do this. I can't think of a good way right now, so I'm just going to create a new page called delete task page. And this is simply going to be React functional components, delete task page. And it's going to be doing something very simple. Params. Use params. Guess we have a button. Are you sure you want to delete this task? Button. All right, I'm just going to code up my yes button would be on click, delete task. We're going to call our API in this delete task method. So I need some helper handler called const delete task. This will actually call our API for us. So we're going to do that arrow function. So if I want to delete our task and then redirect somewhere, so we could do that in our, this could be async. So async. Then we want to have our APIs. We need to import a bunch of stuff. Import, what do I import? The to-do API from .api /to-do. What else do we need? We need use params, imports, use params. Do we need use params? Probably. Import from React router DOM. All right, so our handler simply is going to call const data equals to-do API delete task, which we need to implement. We're going to pass it an ID, which should come from params.task ID. Again, that's why we're using the params from the URL. We want to await that response, assuming that we get, I don't know what our response is going to be actually, but hopefully get something back. We want to maybe navigate to where do we navigate to? I guess we have the other params. We have navigate to /task list $. So again, params has both the task list and ID and the task ID. So we could use params.list ID to go back to that task list. All right, so we deleted a task. Assuming that goes well, we want to navigate after that to back to the parent task list. All right, what am I missing here? So props, I don't think we're just using this. They click delete. If you hit no, I'm not going to implement that. You guys can figure that out, hopefully.
Use
No,
navigate on line 2.
Pardon?
Use navigate and bring in navigate on line 2.
Thank you. Gates. Gates. Navigates. Use navigates. All right, hopefully this will work. We need to go to our API. Again, this is, you gotta know where you need to send the request. And this goes back to reading DRF documentation. Specifically for our delete task, we need to send it to, so this is gonna be delete task. We need to send it to a particular ID. So ID here, and string interpolate. All right, so we send it to task/ID of the task we're deleting. The method has to be a delete because we're using DRF. So it's expecting a delete at this route in order to actually delete it. If we send a post, we'll probably get an error. If we send a patch, again, that's an update. So again, we don't need any body here. So we could actually omit the body section. I don't think we need headers either. I think we just need a method. So we send a delete here. We need to export this, so delete task. And then, okay, so we create an API hook. We're exporting that, importing that in our delete task page. So they can click yes, and then that would call our API delete task and then navigate away. Okay, that looks correct to me. Let's go back to our task page. So our button for deleting tasks is going to navigate to this route, which should bring us to the delete task page. Let's see if that works. Delete task page not defined because importing. Delete. Params, delete task page. Oh. Once. Are you happy now, React? All right, cool. So go to launch. Let's try to delete it. See what happens. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Okay, clicked yes, nothing happens. Let's figure out why. Expected end of JSON inputs. Do I need the application or the type then? All right, maybe my headers are required. Let's see if that makes it happy. Refresh. Yes, delete. 404 not found. API test. Did it actually delete it? I wonder. All right, so yeah, lunch got deleted. So it looks like my navigation's incorrect. Let's try to delete my dinner, delete task. Yes. All right, so it looks like my response is bad. I bet I know why, actually. I remember this, again, nothing that you guys would necessarily know, but if I go back to my API, where's that? I think I recall this error. So what's happening here is I'm getting a specific code back that has no JSON associated with it. So that's gonna get tricky, but let me console.log response.
I think you just have to delete the JSON. It's just a wait response that fixes it, I think.
Where in my try catch?
Yeah, and number 8, when it's a delete, I ran into this problem a while ago.
Yeah.
You just go to the JSON and then it works.
Yeah, so I'm going to console log the status just to see what status I get back on a delete. So why is that complaining to me? Oh, because I can't type. All right, so let's try this again. We're deleting all our tasks. Let's go back to our task list 1. All right, let's delete laundry. I don't want to do laundry, so I'm going to delete it. Yes. All right, so notice you get a 204 response. That is a specific response from a delete. In this case, there's no JSON returned, so it's complaining, hey, this doesn't work. Let me do something like and response dot. Let me do this inside here. If response dot status not equal to 204, again, specifically that 204 comes back from delete. Then we want to process JSON, else we could just return the response you said.
Yes. Yeah, that's how I solved it too. Exactly what you're doing.
I guess, yeah, this should work. Again, I remember this from some past projects. Maybe hopefully it'll save you some time, but for a reason, a delete is not going to return you any JSON because it has no data returned to you. So in this case, if it's not a 204, process a JSON, otherwise just return the response, whatever we get. So let's try that.
Just put a bracket on the else.
I think we're good without it, but so again, single line if else's, you don't need brackets. But good thought. So let's try that. Task list 1. All right, let's delete unpack. Not really a cool task. Delete. There we go. We got taken back to the task page, but nothing happened. So why do we go to the task page? We should go. All right, my navigation screwed up here. I could fix that, but that's going to be the last thing I do today. So we're navigating to task list. Not sure why we're navigating to this. Anyone? Oh, I know why. This needs to be in curly braces. No, that's all right. Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting these %7s. Those are probably some encoded something. Anyone see a mistake here?
Aren't you supposed to just go back to the normal task list?
That's where I want to go to. So the params list ID should have that list ID. So I'm going back to task list, and then it's throwing on some garbage here. So this
Does
is
that have to
task
be in wrapped in curly braces because it's JS, because you use backticks?
No, because this is just a function call, not a JSX element. A good thought.
Right, okay.
For some reason, I'm blanking on here. It's saying
Yeah.
test that list.
Conquer, is it possible that maybe line 4 where it says delete task page, it has capital letters in task and page on line 4?
Oh, that was unintentional, but it's still working surprisingly with that typo. Yeah, so I had surprisingly that worked. Like it found my delete task page somehow, but I'm getting task.list here from my navigation. I don't know how that's happening. Interesting. But let's try it one more time. Running out of tasks here and I'm running out of time. Okay, so let's get rid of vacuum, delete, yes. Yeah. So, oh, let's go into the back end. Okay, so I'm saying the wrong thing to the back end. Delete task. Params.task. Oh, I know where it is. API. Pretty sure I know what it is. Issue is. Now let's go on. Do I need a slash? Does a slash get me again? All right, I got one more task left, so it's all or nothing now. By Xmas presence. Delete. Yes. Nope.
You have capital PA on page. I'm not for. I don't know if that's what Tanya was talking about for the task page.
Yeah, I fixed that. So it's delete task. Delete task.
In your export statement.
Export here.
Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna have to. Sorry, I'm gonna have to wrap up here.
13.
I got a meeting to jump into, but all right. So I do have a React challenge, but I kind of wanted to go over it. So let's. Oh, right here. Gotcha. I will post that challenge. It's kind of hard to understand without a good visual, but I'll try to get back at you guys. But I'll post that in Papa's channel. Sorry for the